Good evening. It is Tuesday, November 12th. Welcome to the Goffstown Budget Committee. We are going to get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Kelly, would you like to start with the roll call?
Sure. Kelly Boyer, Select Board Representative.
Laura Stevens.
Brian Mazer.
Doug Pounds.
Jack Carbonell, School Board Rep.
Joe Alexander.
Frank Hobbs.
Peter Grigorokakis.
Elizabeth Dubrule.
Olivia Welch-Erdahl.
Allison DeCesare.
Richard Manzo.
Samantha Kearns.
And Israel Carey.
And we have Brian Balke, Scott Gross, and Doug, what's your last name? Totten here for staff support tonight. So, welcome. Is there anyone here for public comment? Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment. The next on the agenda is the approval of minutes. We've given them 2 business days to do the minutes, so we're going to hold off on that and give them a break. So we'll probably have those ready probably next week. Next up on the agenda is the proposed warrant article language I passed out at the proposed language to the governing bodies regarding warrant article language. Danielle, can you come up and give us an update, please?
Good evening, everyone. At your last meeting, you recall that there was some discussion about what language could or couldn't be proposed in warrant articles. I just wanted to let you know that the recommendation that was brought forward, the language is acceptable, and if the governing bodies chose to add words or change words in the warrant article in response to this, it would still be acceptable by DRA. Are there any other questions left on?
Any questions for Danielle? No. All right, thank you. So at this time, I want to bring this forward as a motion to recommend the warrant article language be used by the school board and select board. So I want to move it forward. Is there a second?
I'll second so we can discuss.
Yep, second by Laura Stevens. So the language would say, motion to recommend the town of Goffstown governing bodies only use warrant article language that identifies the funding source for appropriation articles. Governing bodies should refrain from identifying unassigned fund balance as not being raised by new taxation. Okay, so at this time, happy to move forward. Go ahead.
So thank you. I looked into this a little bit, and there were a few other ways to word it that other towns in New Hampshire use that I just thought were interesting. I thought I'd put them out there.
Yep.
And these were used quite often in like the voter's guide reading material as well, when there was more of a description and explanation. So, so there was the no new taxation. There's paid for by previous year's taxation, and then there's no amount to be raised by 2025 taxation. I didn't know if those made anything more or less clear, since we're going for clarity. I didn't know if more words was worse. But like I said, I saw a lot of that and kind of pretty deep explanation in voter guides when it came to how things were being paid for. So I'd like to say that in the least, I guess, I'd like to see voter guides really spell that out. And I know the problem, I think, Brian, you maybe said it, I don't exactly remember. It's kind of up to the community to read those and to look those over. But those were just some thoughts that I had.
Okay. Anybody else have thoughts? Sam?
I really I think new maybe, I don't know, I like the other options that you had in there with like 2025 taxation.
No, oh, sorry, can I?
Yeah, no, say the other one too.
No amount to be raised by 2025 taxation or paid for by previous year's taxation was another one. And I thought that was clear, but I didn't know if that added a level of.
Yeah, I like paid for by previous year's taxation. And then I was trying to find, I'm one of those people who wants to like use it in a sentence. And I could only find, looking at last year's warrant articles, one that had that phrasing in it from the town. the town ballot, not from the school's ballot. And I thought that because in my mind, I was definitely going with new, but I think that by 2025 taxation would make sense. So I'm wondering if you would be opposed to putting that in there.
Well, and Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, the reason why you didn't see more of that was because they were saving it, because there was an additional DRA recommended amount to be saved in the unassigned fund balance, so they didn't use or expend the unassigned fund balance on warrant articles as
Yeah, in
often as
past
they have in
years,
years
we've had
past.
more.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what does the committee think? New or, go ahead, Kelly.
Well, I would also just say that this is a recommendation, so
Yeah.
I don't think it hurts to include all of those options. It's just something to consider for clarity. I don't know, I don't think you need to decide necessarily.
Peter?
Just to be clear, we would have to reword it because when we're saying either new taxation or we're saying that it's raised, this was raised in previous years or this is not, we're actually saying if you're going to say unassigned fund balance, don't say not being raised from taxation, but if you would like to add clarity, you could use X, Y, or Z, which we find, acceptable, or we find, I don't want to say acceptable, because the reality is, I think Jared wisely brought up last week, well, what if someone chooses to do something their own way? I just want to hear what the reason is, right? Maybe there's an authentic, real reason why that board says, hey, I understand your recommendation, but this is why we want to go with this, right? And we're all reasonable people. We're just going to listen to that and hear it out. And if we agree, great. Anyway, so I just want to make sure we just change the language to say, please don't include this, but these things are things that we would like to see potentially.
And I mean, this is going to be a recommendation of the governing body, so I assume that Kelly and and Jared will go back to their respective committees and at least discuss what we wanted to move forward, and they can decide to do something with it or not do something with it. But
So
I think the existing language is fine, and then they can say that there's other options on how to word it. But go ahead.
I'm totally in support of this and the options and everything else. I guess I just wonder, does this have to be a formal recommendation? I mean, we're going to be starting lots of conversations with these boards over the course of this budget season. We've expressed our wishes. I mean, can we just say, go back and we think the language needs to be clarified. We've kind of laid it out. Let them hash out what the actual, I don't want us to spend 45 minutes wordsmithing this thing.
Yeah.
When really the point isn't the language in the motion, it's that we would like them to look at this and have a conversation about this.
I mean, I'm ready to vote on it now. I'm also with you where we've already discussed this, so I don't think we need to spend time on it. But I think a formal recommendation would add a little more of a nudge that we're serious about it as a committee. Samantha?
So, and that's what I guess I'm unclear about. If you're looking for a formal, if we want this to be a formal recommendation, I would want to change the wording
Yeah.
to include one of the options that Laura had stated.
In question.
Go ahead.
So if this is a formal recommendation, are we expecting some kind of formal, response back?
No.
Okay. I just want that to be clear as well, since these are other people's boards to do as they wish.
I don't know, aren't we all adults? I mean, I would expect a response, and if we don't get one, say, hey, what's going on with this? I mean,
Yeah, I just don't know how formal it needs to be or is, or if that matters at all, that's all.
Go ahead, Kelly.
I'll just add one thing that might make this easier. We also have not gotten to the point of language for warrant articles yet at Select Board, so when that does happen, I mean, I can certainly bring this forward as the Budget Committee's recommendation to do this and include the options, and then once we get warrant articles complete, they come to the Budget Committee, so you'll all see them, but I'm happy to fill you in after our next Select Board meeting with, that discussion. I'm okay with it. I don't need you all to formally tell me, but that's the purview of this board if you want
So.
to make it official.
So why don't we just hold back on this and have both our reps communicate it with the prospective committees, and then if there's anything else, we'll move forward accordingly, so, is that all right?
Yeah, I'm good with that. I
All
was
right,
gonna
Jack.
echo what Kelly said. I would want to talk to the board about it before. I'm making their choice, not my own right now.
Perfect. Is everyone cool with that? So I'll withdraw my motion, but this will be informal. All right, awesome.
Formally informed.
So we are now moving through, the budget review and deliberation. So for members in the years past, we've typically gone line by line. We have two types of sheets here. We have a sheet with the actuals and then the sheet with the notes.
The notes are this, remember there was confusion, on that?
The lines don't match up.
No, I know that, but like you, the vice chair, a few folks have the notes, not everybody has the notes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just so that's for, the notes really are for administration of that budget, but they also help inform like what's in there, and that's what Jack or Jared or myself would refer back to if there were questions on the actual. So, just so you're aware, Joe.
Okay, and Scott, can you go over briefly you usually have like a salmon colored sheet for like the locations and a blue colored sheet for the
Yeah, it's in.
accounts. Do we have
It's
that
in,
or?
it's in your packets, and it's towards the back of your packets. It's right
Okay, I
there.
see it.
I don't know what page it's on exactly, I have it right in front of me, but it's towards the end, and it tells you the fund is Fund 10, that's the general fund, that's what we're gonna be discussing tonight. There's also a food service fund and a special revenue fund, but for the purposes of this evening, it's the general fund. The location is either 000 is the district, and then each school has a separate location. So Bartlett is 101, Maple Avenue is 102, Glen Lake is 103, Mountain View is 204, and the high school is 305. The function line, there are,
115, right?
I think there's like 18 different function lines. 1,100 is your regular ed, and you'll see that in your packet. 1,200 is special ed, and then there's lines for transportation, facilities, administration, et cetera. Your program codes are really more specific to the discipline that is being taught. So you'll see different programs for general education, music, art, science, phys ed, et cetera. And then lastly, and most importantly, are your account numbers, and some people call them object codes. Everything that starts with a 1 deals with salaries, so you'll see a lot of salary lines that'll be, 111, which is teachers, 112, which is paraprofessionals, et cetera. When you get into the 200s, that's when you're looking at all of your benefit lines. So 211 is health insurance, 212 is dental, and then you'll see different lines for Social Security, retirement, things like that. And then most of the ones that our building principals deal with are your 300s up to 800 series. And again, they all have, all of the codes have corresponding categories, shall we say. So your 611 lines are all your supplies, and then you have consumables would fall into that. Oil and propane, all that stuff is also has separate codes. The reason why these chart of accounts exist is that you're able to compare school districts against each other and against state averages. I would say that based upon my experience with other BAs, we're about 95% on the same page. Believe it or not, some people code things a little bit differently. And the state is embarking on a revision of their chart of accounts as we speak. It'll probably take 2 years to do that. But it does give you the opportunity to draw comparisons. So when we talk about cost per pupil, it kind of uses all of these codes to kind of come up with that cost per pupil, if that helps.
Okay, so is the committee okay with just moving through line by line, going from that? Okay, I mean, I plan to have in the agenda, school budget, and then we go through the town budget, and then we're gonna have a meeting where we discuss holistically what the budget looks like. So I don't want the committee to think, once we go through these, that's it, we can't make any more changes. Like, I want this to be kind of an open process throughout the cycle, and then, at the end, when we kind of put all all of it together, we kind of get a general idea what the what the budget looks like as one. So with that, we can go through and I can move as fast or slow as the committee likes.
I just had a request for, as we go through this timeline, if there's something that is contractually obligated, will you specify that for us?
Sure.
Thanks.
Well, like, if there's a question on it.
Well, I guess, like, I know in years past, sometimes we've had, like, discussions or people have brought motions, and afterwards have been like, oh, like, I want to adjust this, and it's like, oh, we can't adjust it because it's contractually obligated, we're, like, that number is that number. And so I would just want us to, I guess, avoid a future conversation of, like, you know.
Okay, so when a member has a question about a line, say the line number. I'm going to look at Scott. Scott's going to say what particularly is in the line, and then the member can use that information how they will, so that we can, refrain from, like, I think before we made motions and then withdrew them because they were contractually obligated or something like
Yeah.
that, so, okay. Does that work?
The only thing
ahead.
real quick, Joe, I mean,
Yeah.
if we could just do a couple of high-level things, just so that everybody's
Yep.
on the same page. So we're looking at, if this budget is accepted as is, we're looking at a 2.99% increase. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the difference of new spending between the default and the proposed budget is 0.55%.
Yes.
Correct? So I don't know if we have a number in mind for inflation. I usually like to kind of triangulate things with inflation. I looked online, the best I could find was an average over the past 12 months of 3.4%. I don't know if people think that's right or wrong, but it's somewhere around that 3 mark, from what I could tell.
Okay.
And if I could just say that while that is an important benchmark, the school and town budgets have things that are way outside of, so they do not include special education out-of-district placements in the cost of living adjustment. And in both New Boston and Goffstown, we've seen residential out-of-district placements, which can cost over $400,000, which can destroy your budget. So I just leave you at that.
No, I mean,
So,
I get that.
yeah.
There's going to be things that don't
Yes, yeah.
align perfectly with, we
Yep.
can't just say 3% across the board and that's it.
Right.
But it does help it's a check when you're looking at these things and what you're talking about. So, I mean, you guys, your overall increase has come in under that.
Yeah, and if I could also, Joe, I wanted to explain to the Budget Committee that when the budget failed last at the polls, if you recall, last year, we had a lot of minuses in the new column, and then there were some additions in that new column. And some of those minuses are now in the default budget because they were transfers. And in the notes, I put, and I also provided in your packets as to where all those, there was almost 100 budget transfers that were done as a result of that default budget. So I wanted to be completely, school board wanted to be completely transparent with where all that was.
Okay. Go ahead, Brian.
If I could just add to that, thank you, Joe. We set a goal of keeping the new spending at a limit of no more than 300,000. I wanted to be really mindful of the fact that we're on a default budget this year. So that's the reason that we kept the spending lower. There are all kinds of projects that we felt like we needed to move forward, but we have slowed down the pace, and we've tried to prioritize things as best we can so that we didn't have a larger spike this year because we were on default. So we were very purposeful about that number.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else from the committee before we dive in? All right, let's get going. So we'll start on page 1. So my plan is to probably get through the elementary schools tonight, but depending on the pace of the committee, we can speed that up or slow that down.
You know what page that brings us to, actually, just so I can-
102 is Maple, so after 102, page 36. We might not get there.
I just wanted
Yeah.
to, that's what I'm
can
trying
vote.
to track, like,
Maybe
okay.
optimistic.
When we're talking about like $10 for like a half an hour, I want to make sure.
Yes. All right, so we'll start on page 1. This is the district line. So in these lines, you have a lot of the IT for the district. You have a lot of special ed spending for the district. So
Transportation is in there.
transportation, and other district salaries. Just start on page 1.
Smells good anyways.
Go ahead, Peter.
I just have a dumb question. So when I'm looking at the expenditure status report, I'll still see lines of spends and expenditures. So when I'm looking at the budgeting, is that because lines have moved that I don't see numbers here? So meaning like, as an example, teacher salaries. So like line 3.
Okay.
Is the reason that I don't see anything here because something moved or just something else?
It's simply because there was no dollars in that particular line. So when it prints the report, you're seeing nothing, right, on that
Oh.
page? Right.
Okay, yeah, but when I'm looking at the expenditures report, I see spending, unless I'm looking at this wrong, I really might be looking at this incorrectly, but I'm looking at spending on those lines in the expenditure report, but nothing in the budget report.
I'd have to see what you were looking at. I don't know.
Are the
what-
lines exact-
what-
are the
What,
lines the
what, can you
same?
give me a
I
14-digit
believe
code?
that, okay, so we have like teachers, just like the first line, right? Teacher salaries, 111. Am I right that that's?
I just need
that's
to
your
know
line?
what location, function, program code you're referring to.
It's line 3, right?
I think he's looking at the district lines.
Yeah.
And that there aren't regular ed teachers associated with
With the
that.
district.
So I think, Peter, when you get into
When
the.
I get to another section,
When
I'll
you get
see
to the
something on
school
that line.
lines,
Yeah.
in the different
Got it.
locations, you'll see them.
And it should match up on the 14-digit code.
Yeah, so, yeah, again, it just depends on which section we're looking at. Thank you.
Elizabeth.
Line 651, regular ed tech education, non-capital
So-
software.
Are we
Let's
going
look
page
by-
by
we're
page? or-
going-
That's the expenditure.
page 1?
All right, we're looking for budget, proposed budget
With actuals.
with actuals.
She had just said.
I gave
she
you
was
the
just
fun,
saying-
I gave you the
Oh,
account.
okay,
Sorry, I gave you
let's do the
account.
reference
Yeah,
lines.
there's a
Do you want the
reference all the
line?
way to the left. There's a
Okay, line
reference number.
20.
Okay,
Yep.
good. I think we're on the same page now.
Sorry. There's a lot of numbers.
Can this page not count? Just not count this page.
So I apologize if you've already explained some of these things in your presentation
Right.
before, but it's not always clear what line they end up on.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious about this. I mean, this has jumped around quite a bit from 2023, then it dropped a lot in 2024, it's pretty low in 2025, and then it jumps back up again in 2026.
Yeah, so this line is been ever increasing as we have more and more devices in the schools. We've also gone from now software as a service. So now you have to buy licenses for everything. So software you used to be able to buy you can buy it and then you have your copy. And now it's almost completely gone the opposite direction. We have to pay a licensing per device. So you'll see for this particular line, we pay software, which is called FileWave, which manages the devices. So we have to know where these devices are, the updates on the devices. When you have, a couple of thousand devices between teachers and students, you have to track that. We have to provide, it's $42,000 just to provide Office 365 licenses on all of those devices. So that's Word, Excel, all of your productivity, Microsoft products. And then there's just a whole host of different required licenses. So we have backup software that we have to use. We have server virtualization so that if we, God forbid, you have redundancy in your server. So if you, God forbid, you get hacked, you can isolate that one server and then reboot your system with the backup servers. We use electronic signatures now, so there's a license for that called PandaDoc. There's just a lot of the things that the school district and the town, for that matter, is using is now software related. What else do we've got?
So what's the
network
difference between
monitoring.
capital software and non-capital software? I don't even see a capital software.
It's just in the chart of accounts that's used by school districts in the state, that's what they call it. So it's just, it's the
Subscription
software that you need to kind of run your programs and your district in a way.
Okay.
So sometimes the software is like teaching type software and is categorized a little bit differently, but this is really more of your back-end operational software.
Okay. So the jump is because, is that a hard number? Is that an estimate? Is that?
It tends to be, it's in between a hard number and an estimate, but we are, in terms of our actuals, we do have costs for the 20 different applications that we tend to buy every year. So our IT director has spelled that out, and what you can never figure out is what are they going to bump up. So unlike that, we have seen like a 5%, they call it a lift in the software industry, where they raise their price 5% a year, and in some cases it's 8, but rarely is it 3%. So Steve, who's our IT director, he, monitors this, and he gives me those numbers. And Doug, that's pretty much what.
The only thing I might add to that, and maybe just as a high-level overview for the Budget Committee, I think we talked about this at the school presentations that we did. IT is an area that you will see growth throughout the budget, in this budget. And I'm going to warn you, it's going to be FY '26, it's going to be FY '27, it's going to be FY '28. This is going to continue to increase for the next 3 or 4 fiscal years. The other piece that you'll see, there are no new positions in this budget, but in subsequent years, you'll see more personnel for IT. This is an area that we are short, that we need more resources, and we're trying to do that over a couple of different fiscal years instead of, a big hit all at once.
So when you say it's going to end at, we're going to see it for 3 or 4 years, do you mean we'll
Increases.
be caught up? But we'll be caught up at 3 or 4 years and it'll be on a maintenance schedule? Or is
Oh,
there
boy, I don't
something
know if
else
we'll
that-
ever get caught up on technology because we continue to not be a one-to-one device district. So I think we'll continue to get closer, but we're just looking at it saying, we have these needs, and instead of trying to do it all in one year, we want to try to spread it out a little bit.
Yeah, the maintenance is, what we're talking about is like replacement cycle too. So once we get somewhat caught up, then getting to what would be a yearly cost roughly, that would kind of keep the equipment, or every 6 years buy new computers. So have something kind of clear for people to look at that they can kind of project off of as well.
Okay.
Frank?
So in essence, what you're saying, the 45,800 encompasses increased numbers of units and software inflation, in short.
Yeah, and a lot of it, when you look at this list, IT security, we have had now, 3 audits in the last 2 years on IT security, and we have to do these things. I mean, municipalities and school districts are the most vulnerable for IT attacks. Because typically, municipalities and school districts don't have the resources like major corporations do. And we have to put in place, have software and processes for redundancy to make sure that we don't get hacked. And if we do, we've got a way to isolate that. So that's kind of what we're seeing, in terms of IT and IT spend. It's prevalent everywhere in the education world right now.
I'll just say that's the scariest committee I sit on, when you sit there and talk with Steve Bourget for a while, and he tells you what he's up against, trying to keep it updated, because that stuff falls out of service. It's not, there's no protection for it, so once it's past its usable date, it's got to be replaced. So it was eye-opening to be on that committee.
And if I could also add, I think this question really hits to the core of this budget and the increases, because when you go through this line by line, as we mentioned in the budget presentation, IT and facilities represent most of that new spending. And you'll see that as you go through. I'm not saying all of it, but I bet you it's close to 60-70% of it.
Okay, any other on page 1? Allison?
Line 23. So it looks like the 24 actual was almost 3 times what we budgeted, and much higher even than the 23 actual, but then we've gone down to the 27.5 again. Something special happened last year that kind of almost tripled it?
Yeah, like I think it was our Milestone server, so we had a server that holds all of our security footage, and that failed, and the board had to replace it. That was a $40,000 server. So
I think this speaks to the volatility of these
Yeah.
lines, though. So if you look to the 2022 actuals, you can see we spent 90. So there are, in totality, if we have a need, we're going to address them, and sometimes that's going to result in budget overages in some of these lines when we look back in the rearview mirror. But this is the volatility of IT. Our equipment is old. Anytime you have old equipment, the chances are you might have to put a new transmission in that old truck of yours, right? So we're driving around knowing that we have a lot of miles on the truck, and sometimes things break. So our IT stuff is kind of like a F-150 with 230,000 miles on it.
Allison?
So then, what makes you guys think that 27.5 will be enough?
It isn't enough.
It's not, you're just
No.
a transfer. Yeah.
There isn't enough, but we have to hit our targets and we did have a default budget.
Right.
So.
And prioritize.
I could make an argument that I could add 200,000 to 300,000 to that
Right.
line for a whole host of things, but have to be mindful that we had a default budget and we got the message from the community, so we can't ignore that.
Yep. Okay.
Brian and Peter, or Brian?
Go ahead, Peter.
Peter.
Well, thank you. So you're saying you're not putting it in, but you're expecting there's a good chance that you'll end up potentially spending it there, so you'd have to move it from somewhere else? Like, is that what you're kind of?
I think we would be in more of a reactionary or an emergency mode. So it's not like, to give you an example, we know those Promethean boards there are going to have to get replaced at a certain period of time. But that is not a mission critical type of endeavor. A milestone server, which holds all of our security footage, is mission critical. Or if there was a server that held, our logon or our logons, like, that's mission critical. And even though you didn't budget for it, you got to get it done. And what I'm saying is that we know that in terms of our replacement cycle for IT, we cannot rely upon grants. So we leveraged grants for many years, ESSER grants, et cetera, to buy certain things. When those grants are not there, you got to pay for it. So, and that's something that Doug is working with with our IT director to come up with that, what level of spending is needed to replace our existing equipment.
Good, Peter?
Yeah, well, actually, kind of does kind of dovetail on my other bigger question. If I'm trying to get a sense of how not money is moved, but how we're moving things around throughout the year in order to cover different expenditures, what is the biggest use of that move? Are we usually moving between location? I'm saying, like, if I see something that was budgeted in the district location, but it ends up, right, in overall terms, I look at that function, right, showing the spend. Are you essentially saying, like, okay, this is my function, I just want to,
Yeah, I can explain that. So,
yeah.
I
Does that make
hear-
sense,
Yeah, it
like,
does.
what I'm asking? Like,
Yes.
I'm trying to figure out, like, where do we move money fast and where do we have to, like, get?
So the school board uses what's called budget transfers. So in the case of that milestone server that I gave you an example of, I had to do a budget transfer, and the school board approves that at a regularly scheduled board meeting. And then in addition to that, when we get audited, we have to show all of those budget transfers to the auditors. And it has to be like, so it's not just me or Brian, like, moving. Our policy says that anything over 10,000 requires school board approval to move monies from one line to another line.
So are they
in the
locked
case
in,
of-
basically?
You're not locked in. I mean, these amounts are there, and because the budget is somewhat fluid, I mean, if there is to give you another example, this year, we moved a paraprofessional position from Mountain View to Maple Avenue. And we do this, based upon student need. So it goes before the school board, you explain it, and then there was this past meeting where they approved, or the one before that, they approved a budget transfer from one line to another. If that helps you.
It does, I'm really sorry.
No, go ahead.
Just a couple more things. So when you're saying a different line, right, I'm looking at the proposed budget with actuals, which we have separated by location, right? Are you specifically saying, like, hey, this is coded, right, 0001100 as the function, program, account, like, all those numbers, if I move to anything else, so if I move this money from account 341 to 431,
Right.
then my request is, we want to move from 341 to 431. Or I could be saying, I want to move this, which is 1116,341, from location 000 to location 101. Like anything, you have to request any movement between any function,
Over
location.
over $10,000, yeah.
Yeah.
And then even the ones under that, I report back to the board on.
And I'll just give you the reason that I'm asking all those questions is I'm just trying to get a sense of how I can take a look at your expenditure status and really be able to compare to what we're showing here, because these are all separated out by location, but my expenditures aren't.
Yeah, and
That's my hard.
And it's a great question, because you're looking at this from a line by line, a really granular level. Technically speaking, the budget that the DRA and people, it's done at a function level. So all these little tiny, that helps administrators, it helps school boards see where the monies are going, but the bottom line is that you have to be within your, you try to stay true within your function lines, which is regular ed, special ed, et cetera. The issue with the school budget is that it's very fluid, meaning that you have a student who comes in, you didn't budget for those special needs, and now you gotta find the money somewhere else to make that happen. And maybe you get lucky because you have a few unfilled positions and you're moving things around, but it's constantly in flux. Every time we seem to have a meeting, there's another need. I don't know how else to say it, so, and we have to figure that out.
Thank you. All right, Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a clarifying question and then a follow-up question. The location of 000, that's strictly district?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm missing something here. So on reference number 26 or line 26, why is there a line item for teacher salaries?
Sometimes there's teachers who we budget at the district level and they go between multiple schools.
Okay.
So this would be an example of
They're
somebody
not assigned to
who
a
goes.
They're
particular
not
school.
assigned to us.
Or
Right.
itinerant.
So they
Okay.
may go between Bartlett and Maple and Glen Lake, but instead of putting them in one of those schools, we
Okay.
put them in the district.
All right, thank you.
All right, everyone go with page 1?
I have one follow-up.
Go ahead, Laura.
to Brian's.
No problem.
Line 26, I had a question about that as well. So now knowing it's teachers that may move around, is the huge jump from any given year to any other given year just due to the number or hours of teachers moving?
So
Like,
on,
I just can't make rhyme or reason of, the differences.
yeah, let me just get to that line.
Yeah, what teachers are these?
This one was, that was line 18,111. Bear with me 1 second. So this was an instructional coach for literacy and math, and it also included our district teaching staff track pool. So that's what the notes I have for that one.
There's two positions?
It's one position.
Oh, one position.
Yeah, and it's an elementary, split between elementaries.
Okay.
So
Kelly?
Oh,
One second, Kelly?
You have a follow-up?
Is it
I
follow?
do, yeah.
Go ahead.
Just to clarify, so the default is so low. Can you speak to that?
It's just the nature of that, the person who's in that position, it's lower cost than it was the prior year.
Okay.
And, our HR director, what she does is she plugs in who is in that position and then essentially what their pay is, and sometimes it's lower, so.
And sometimes it's more than one person.
Right.
Okay.
So if you look at this particular
There were more
line,
people in that
if you
one.
look out to the FY '22 actuals, so $1,000, right? So that tells me there was no one in that position that year. So for whatever reason, we didn't have a need for an elementary district-wide person. And then you can see 42 grand, that would be a part-time position. And then you'll see we jumped up. So that probably included more than 1.0 full-time equivalents. So that might have had a full-time person plus another part-timer. And sometimes, again, we move these positions around when the need, based on the need.
Sure.
That's it. So as groups of kids move on, you might see something go from the middle, the elementary lines into the middle lines and then into the high school lines.
Kelly?
I have a technical question. I'm looking at line 20, and I apologize in advance because I'm sick, but I know we do this differently between town and school. So if we say the 2025 budget would have been the default number, correct me if I'm wrong, can you explain how the FY26 default increases for something like non-capital software?
Yeah, so if you have mandatory programs, which we do, so we have mandated trainings for suicide prevention, no intel, which would, so you have these mandatory programs that you have to train all of your staff on, and they all have to be done by a certain date. We have to do those trainings, so we've decided to use software rather than having face-to-face. So those mandatory trainings are now, they're delivered via software. So that's why, because it's mandated by law, that training, it's in the default. But typically, it's usually the same as the current year. In this particular case, that was one instance of one. And let me see if there's another one. I know that one for a fact accounted for the difference between the default and, yeah, that's the one. It was around 9,000 for that software.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to page 2, page 1 also. Scott, can you tell me what the actuals for the subs are this year? Subs to line?
What they are right now,
Yeah.
as we stand?
Well, no, you're early in the year.
Yeah, so you'll see that they have been going up and up and up.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why we felt we had to kind of close that delta a little bit. So you'll see that there was a default budget transfer of $50,000, and then we put another 25 of new spending to get to 375. So we know that we're shy on that one, but, and again, trying to keep that difference between of new spending under 300,000, that's one area where.
This is one we could have put another
Could have put
100
another,
grand.
but didn't.
On that same line, are you guys still having so much trouble hiring substitutes, finding
Challenges,
substitutes?
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah, so we have in our contract the ability to have teachers here at the high school cover classes, et cetera, and you have to pay them for a sixth class. So you have ways of dealing with it, but it's still a challenge. And we've tried to raise the pay. We have a tiered structure where if substitutes work more than 20 days, they get a higher rate of pay. So you're trying to incentivize people being subs. We have some, depending upon the situation, we have long-term subs where they're doing it because a teacher's out for a month or 2 months or something. So it's still a challenge, bottom line.
And this is a line that we could have put another 100,000 in, but didn't.
And if I could, on line 32, just so we're aware here, our retirement stipends are done at the district level. So in both of our teacher and support staff contracts, their contracts call for a retirement stipend. It's like a payment if they've had so many years of service. So you'll see that in the current budget, it's budgeted at 187, but based upon the notifications that we have received by the time that this budget is set, that number is now 125. So we try to, you'll see that that's another number that goes up and down simply because it's all based upon when they notify us, which is typically, I think it's middle of September, early October, and then we plug those in.
Good. Elizabeth?
Line 49, regular ed, elementary and secondary ed, other professional services. What is that?
So this one here is Danielle's cost. No, it's the town.
Like she left.
She's not, she's gone. So we pay the town of Goffstown for parks and recreation services. They mow our grounds, and we also contribute towards GTV as well. We used to pay towards an SRO, and then that, I'm trying to remember, Kelly, that was what, like 2 years ago we stopped? We pivoted it?
Yeah.
So now this is for town services. So for those who are newer to the Budget Committee, we're one of the unique towns that partners with its school, this town and the school partner pretty well. So the DPW plows our parking lots, Parks and Rec mows our fields. We share our gymnasium space with Parks and Rec, so there's a lot of interplay. So rather than, same thing on the garbage pickup and the recycling, in some communities, it doesn't happen that way. And then the district has to contract with a plowing company, which could cost a couple of $100,000, and/or for rubbish removal. So we're pretty fortunate that the town departments work closely together. And again, this is just the school district helping defer some of the costs on the town side.
Okay.
Olivia.
A question on that same line. I know Rick had talked about with the tennis courts and talking to you guys about participating in the cost of that. Would that be where we would see that as well, or
No,
would that
and
be
thi-
somewhere else? on
if it
another
was a
year?
budgetary thing, yes, but I just brought that to the school board at their last meeting.
Okay.
So, if and when that does happen, we're gonna have to figure out a way, what we owe and how we're gonna pay for it, because it's not in this line.
Brian.
Thank you, Chair. Line number 44, the tuition reimbursement. I know it's back in 2022, it was around the same level and then it dipped and went back up. Is there a consistent level of utilization for the reimbursements?
So this is contractual.
It is
So,
contractual.
Yeah, so
Oh,
it's
okay.
in
This
the
is in our
teacher
teacher contract.
contract.
Oh, okay.
So if they have up to 60,000.
Gotcha.
But if it doesn't all get spent, it doesn't all get spent.
And
We
we
have to
can't,
budget for
and I
it.
can't budget transfer out of that line.
Got it, okay, thank you.
Okay. Move on to page 3. Elizabeth.
Line 61, the special ed elementary assistant principal salary.
And I think on this one, hold on one second.
Was this an assistant principal that was divided between schools?
Yeah, hold on one second. Let me look at my notes here. No, that wouldn't be no, that is, Dan. That's Dan Johnson. Yeah.
So this is, this position is our board-certified behavioral analyst. Previously, that was done as a special ed contracted
Contracted
service. So not to skip ahead, but if you were to look at the top of page 4, you'll see a rather large contracted service line. Previously, historically, we paid for BCBA, the board-certified behavioral analyst position, out of that. That's now a district position, and it's budgeted there at the 95 rate.
So which line did that come out of, Brian?
The 1,200,
81 maybe?
339, line 81.
So if you look at, Elizabeth, you look at the 2024 actual, we paid
Right, so
$668,000.
Yeah, and now it's down to 550.
Right.
Okay. So it's not an assistant principal?
It's a behavioral
it's a-
specialist.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's, again, sometimes the coding doesn't allow you to.
Doesn't match up
To change
perfectly,
what
but
the-
that's what that
what the
position
titles
is. It's our
are. Yeah, I get
behavioral
it.
person.
Okay.
And the other thing with that position is now we're able to hopefully get more reimbursements because that person can sign off on therapeutic modalities where we get revenue from Medicaid. So whereas we couldn't do that before with our contractual service provider. So it's another little bit of a positive.
So kind of following up on this whole thing with special ed. So we are also obligated to provide services for children who are attending charter schools?
Yeah.
Yes.
And what about other schools in the district? Like if you have someone in a private school, are they on their own? We are not on the hook for that, or?
If they're in a private school, they're on their own. If they're in a charter school, that falls exclusively on the local school district of record.
Okay, so is that where these
all special ed
services are
services in
coming
any
out of?
charter school come out of the
This
district.
SAU part of the budget, or the district part of the budget, I mean, or do they come out?
You'll see that there are charter school
Lines.
in
In special ed.
special ed.
Oh, because we also have to provide transportation, right?
Transportation, could be one-on-one therapies, speech, OT, all of those services. And unfortunately, in charter schools, we don't have an economy of scale.
Right.
So if we have, services that we're providing at Maple Ave, we've got, a whole series of kids, there's an economy of scale. Sometimes with a charter school, you might be you're buying a service for one kid, and sometimes you're paying a little more for that. It's a challenge.
So we're required to go to their charter school to provide services. We can't require them to come to Maple Ave or wherever to get their services.
Yeah.
Okay,
And that's on line 107.
okay.
Sometimes kids do come to the schools to receive those services, but not always.
Okay.
Yep. And I would say that charter schools get more money in adequacy than public schools do.
Really?
Yep.
Okay.
But I'm not going to talk about funding tonight. I'm going to behave myself, I promise.
Well, we might talk about funding. Okay.
Are you all set, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I think I'm sorry. I was like, I had a thought, and then it kind of fell away.
It happens.
okay.
Yeah.
Scott, I'm looking at line 79. What's that $10,000 in new default spending?
Oh, so again, these are required trainings by our special ed department. They used to be funded by what's called our IDEA grant, and the IDEA grant amount has been reduced. But these, we have to provide educators, CPI is one. So if kids are, crisis prevention, so if kids are dysregulated, and you need special training on how to de-escalate things.
And physically manage,
Yeah.
because it's important for people to know that we have very dysregulated children that do require physical management in our schools. And so to do that, you have to have people trained in a particular methodology. You have to make sure that they've all are updated annually.
And it's something that this is mandatory, so they have to be trained on an annual basis, and we have turnover in teaching and para positions, so they require this training typically during the summertime is
And so
when they get it.
the training is $10,000 exactly? Or what is, like,
It's the estimate of what the training is,
okay.
yeah.
What did the grant fund before?
It funded the training, which was approximately $10,000.
Okay, all right. Any other-
Excuse me,
Go ahead,
Mr. Chair. Just keep, what's dysregulated mean? I've never heard that term before.
Throwing things, punching, screaming, just
It's a fancy way
going
of saying
batty.
misbehaving.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
But to a much higher level than you
Yeah.
can ever imagine.
Okay,
All right.
And some of it is
Yeah.
neurologically based.
Yeah.
So this is not just kids behaving badly. These are children that they might have some neurological conditions, they might have social, emotional issues. And I think another theme that you'll see throughout this budget is we continue to have a lot of challenging kids. And they are increasing.
Olivia?
I would like to just, as a general thing, say that I think it's incredibly inappropriate for us to belittle and demean children that are struggling in their learning environment. So I appreciate Superintendent Balke for clarifying what being dysregulated means, because it's not just a child being pissed off, and it's not just a child misbehaving. It's kids that are struggling to learn.
All right, thank you. We're moving on to go ahead, Samantha.
So this is, I guess, a question for lines 50, 58, and then also for line 66. Like, it just feels like there's such a big gap between the default and then what we are spending in this year. And I know that you guys are trying to hit targets, but I also just feel like the numbers aren't.
These are people that are in those
Right.
positions that more than likely cost less or are not taking a particular plan. So
But like half?
it's possible, yes.
Okay.
So the difference between someone who's on a family plan and someone who's not taking insurance at all is massive. So it is very possible. And I think we try to stay very true to these things. So like when it's special education, we want the budget committee to respect when the cost goes up, that you will trust the school district, that we have a student that requires a placement, et cetera. And in return, if the costs go down, we reflect that in the default budget as well. So we have to have that, you know. So in this case, this is what the personnel cost is for that particular function line, and it's lower.
Okay.
Yeah.
So sometimes with salaries, since you're budgeting out like a year, there's people who leave, and sometimes you're hiring the position at a cheaper rate because the person coming in has less experience. So that, a lot of times, is going to be the discrepancy between a higher budget and then the default going down because the actual person now is less experienced, therefore has less salary.
Okay. Okay. I just wanted to make sure we were staying like true to what these numbers should be and not, I guess not, I don't want us to change them later and move them around because I think each of
We don't
these-
anticipate that, and
Yeah.
the school district wants, it's what those people in those positions cost, and if it's less in a given year, that has to be reflected. And then if it's more in a following year, that's the other case,
Right.
but I
Okay.
think we have to stay true to what the actuals are.
Okay.
Peter, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Scott, because based off of the way you answered Sam's question and how maybe we talked about, and I'm going backwards, page 2, reference number 30, I'm kind of taking note of different lines to an extent. I'm simply thinking of like, okay, so line 30 on this, we're almost saying we're going to under budget for, in some ways. That's kind of what I heard you guys saying. And then in this line 66, what we're saying is, no, we're not under budgeting, we're just saying things are changing and the
Correct.
actuals are telling us, or the actual, data out there is
We
telling us
know we've
this is
got
what-
somebody in that role,
Yeah, it's a
so.
specific person.
And Peter, we are purposely under budgeting line
Line
30.
Yeah.
Purposely under budgeting, and it is the only line that I can think
Yeah.
of that we purposely knowingly under budget by $100,000+. This is another one that we're hoping to make up
Just
over
trying to gradually-
incrementally over a
incrementally.
couple of fiscal years, because we have pretty good history on our substitutes, right? So
Yeah.
we've run these schools for a long time. If it costs us between $400,000 and $500,000 for substitutes, that's what it's gonna cost. So when we budget $350, we're gonna be short. We're gonna be short.
Thank you, by the way.
Okay, page 4, I'm moving on to. Peter?
Can you tell us a little bit more about reference number 83 and where we're seeing the biggest difference from?
Yeah, sure. So you'll see from the FY '24 budget to the FY '25 budget, that the increase there was pretty much a residential out-of-district placement cost. In terms of the FY '25 budget to the default, we're seeing one more placement as well as a 5% increase in the out-of-district costs that the providers are charging us. So the
State
state
approved.
allows.
State approved. So
State approves it.
all of these out-of-district schools have gone up 5% because that's the amount. The state of New Hampshire actually sets their rates for these private schools, and they all increased by 5%, and they've increased by 5% every single year, unlike our budget and unlike adequacy.
And so the 2025 budget, that was based on the anticipated or actual placements that you had for 2025?
These are actual placements.
Those are the
Correct.
actual placements,
Yep.
and then you're anticipating based on the
And
placements you anticipate?
I know this is happening. We met today, and I know this placement is happening now. So it's,
Yeah.
it's, there are times when we don't know. I mean, and every once in a while, we'll have a student who was placed, they come back to the district, that's a great thing. But that doesn't always happen. So
New Boston had
New
two of
Boston had
those
two of them.
this year.
Yeah.
And it's
Kids that were out of district and came back.
Significant, $350,000
Huge
savings to their
change.
budget. Yeah,
Yep.
yep.
I mean, we'll sit here and talk about $8,000, sorry.
And this
a
is the
few times.
volatility of special education.
Yeah.
Special education is very unpredictable.
So, just to clarify, the state authorized a 5% increase in these schools'
Yeah.
charges. Did they increase?
Every year.
Did they increase how much they send in special education?
No, they
to the
decreased it.
district? So they decreased, they authorized them to charge us more while decreasing their contribution.
Correct. Percentage-wise. Did you talk about the special education aid with this group?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think I did.
We touched on last.
We did, I think we did it at,
meeting.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that's accurate.
Okay.
$255,000 this year in special ed aid.
That we
has
didn't
to be-
receive.
That
That
we
we
did
didn't
not
receive,
receive.
that has to be absorbed by the local taxpayer.
Okay.
Laura?
Can you say that one more time, louder for the people in the back? It was, they increased
So-
what they're allowed to charge by 5%, and they decreased what they give us for aid.
So special education aid is a state, it's a state program. So school districts that have high costs associated with special ed, when kids cost 3.5 times the state tuition average, we're able to start to recoup some of those costs up to 10 times the state tuition average. And then beyond 10 times, the state is supposed to absorb the whole cost. However, what we saw this year is the total amount of money that the state had available for special education aid for all school districts in the state. The requests came in way higher than what the state had. So instead of reimbursing us at the amount that we expected, they prorated it to 0.6.
67%.
Okay, I do remember seeing
67%
those
of
numbers
what
and
we were
something.
expecting for revenue.
Okay.
And special education aid, it used to be called catastrophic aid. That might be a phrase that people might have heard in the past. But it comes a year later, so you actually take it in as revenue a year after you've already made your payment. So the amount that we'll get from the state for special education aid, we already spent.
Okay.
We already spent it. And we're expecting that revenue to come from the state, but unfortunately, we're only going to get 67% of what we expected.
So,
Oh.
I was going to say, just for greater context, we received a letter or memo from the state today?
Today.
Today.
From the commissioner.
From the commissioner, looking at 8 years of a look back. There was a substantial increase in the number of students who required special ed services that was not budgeted for. So I believe it was a 12% increase in 1 year. So when the legislature sets their budget, and they typically will do that, you know, it's a biennial budget, so it could be 2 to 3 years out when they've set the budget, there was a shortfall. In prior years, they prorated 98.3% in 2023 and 87% in 2024, and then this year, it's at 67%.
This is the lowest one I remember.
yeah,
The only other time that I remember it being in the 60s was back when Craig Benson was the governor. It's been that long.
So,
Been a while.
I think this will be something that the legislature will need to look at when they develop their next budget, because there are more students that require these services, and the pressure on the local communities is there. So again, that was a $255,000 that now has to be provide, you know, the taxpayers have to foot that one, so.
And I'll just add, putting on my other hat, there's gonna be significant challenges on the state level with the decline in revenues, and then we have a payout mandatory for the Sununu Youth Services Center and things like that. So there's a lot of things on the state level that, budgeting wise, it's not really like where I'm an expert in, but I know that we're gonna be facing challenges there, so I don't know if, see how it goes.
Wait, why do we have declining revenues at the state level?
What?
Why do we have declining revenues at the state level?
The revenue numbers aren't hitting. The
Targets.
last revenues that came, the revenue number, the target that we set. they haven't been hitting those numbers. And that was in the past couple months, right? So probably, they were all year until about September, October.
We all need to drink more, because most of the revenue comes from
Yeah.
liquor stores.
Liquor stores.
Try some Keno,
Yeah.
legalize
Play
some
more lottery.
cannabis, something like that. Allison?
Do you know the revenue source for the state money that they give us for special ed? Or is it just an overall?
So the special education aid is a straight, it's a straight state function. And I think it's one budget line. I don't think it's a combination. Whereas the educational trust that they pay adequacy out of, there are multiple kind of revenue streams that go into that. But I think special education aid is just one budget line.
So for example, if we still had the interest and dividends tax, would they be able to use some of that revenue to pay for special ed, do you believe?
I really don't think so, but I wouldn't, I really don't know.
Okay.
But I want them to pay it.
I know, that's
Yeah.
why I'm trying to figure out
I don't care where
why
it
they're
comes
not
from.
anymore.
Yeah. Meet your obligation.
Right.
I'll send the letter from the commissioner to Catherine, Danielle, and you, and then you can send it off to the.
By all means. Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Line 87, I noticed there's a new item for new equipment. Could you comment to that?
It's a student need, probably.
Probably, but just curious.
Yeah.
So this is a special education line, so.
Says FM systems? Yeah, it's sound amplification systems
Okay.
that are required because of student needs or students.
Sam?
I guess this is just a general question for lines like 90 through 105. What is ESY?
Extended school year.
Okay.
So anything that you see that says ESY, we're required to provide students that have special education needs with extended school year programming
So like-
beyond 180 days.
It's like summer school?
Yes.
Okay.
But it's not limited
But
to
not
summer
this-
school. So
Okay.
actually, in the world of special education, it can be kind of year-round, but primarily it's summer school.
Okay.
Yep, because we don't want kids kids who might have learning challenges, we want them to continue to make progress
Yeah.
and not lose the grounds that they've made.
Well, I mean, every kid forgets everything all summer. Anyway. I don't think that's.
They
limited
forget
to
a
just
lot.
special ed.
They
Yeah.
forget a lot.
All right, page 5, and moving on.
So you guys were asking about the charter school services. Some of those are at the top of page 5, line 107, 108. And you can see volatility there. So for example, if you look at line 108, in FY '22, it was 28,000, but then jumped to '24, it was 109. So again, not knowing what students are going to be eligible, what services those kids are going to need, what their locations might be.
Now it's back to 64.
Yep.
So could that be maybe students pursuing EFAs in another?
It
like
could be
something like
kids,
that?
it could be kids that might have been in a charter school and then moved into, they might be coming to Goffstown High School. It could be, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. But again, this is an example of, we're going to budget for whatever the anticipated costs
Yeah.
are. So if the cost goes down, the budget goes down.
Right.
So all of their adequacy aid goes to the charter school?
Yes.
The state aid.
The state ad-
The
that's-
local aid, no.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Laura?
Line 129, at the school board meeting, I don't remember exactly what it was, but the salary for athletic something was going up. Am I wrong? Am I misremembering? I feel like there was going to be a raise in some kind of athletic something.
Oh, no, no,
salary.
yes, that was for people who perform
Oh,
duties
the
like
clock
clock
management.
management,
Oh,
and
okay,
that's
okay.
what that is.
So where does that,
That'll fall when you get to the high school.
okay, great, thank you.
Okay,
It'll
also
be the same code, but it'll be 305.
Okay.
we'll move on to page 6.
So that's something.
Laura.
Thank you. So the top line, 132, the athletic stipends. What, can you explain the difference between like the stipend, the thing I'll see in the line when we get to the high
Yeah,
school,
so
how that all
This
goes
this should
together?
say co-curricular.
Yeah, this line would be athletics and co-curriculars, so this would be costs
Okay.
associated with our coaches, our advisors for all of our different programs. And Samantha's question earlier about ones that are kind of required, this particular line, those stipends are included in our teacher contract.
So that's
But it's
why
not
you'll
just-
see it's the same.
It's not just athletics, though.
No, these are
Like
your
clubs.
yearbook advisors,
Okay, great.
those, it's everything.
Okay, thank
Yep.
you.
All right. Gonna move on, page 7. Page 8. Go ahead, Brian.
Just real quick, I don't remember this, but on line 167, guidance testing, help me understand what that is again?
So this is a number of different tests that we do. I think this one in particular is one that's called the NWEA, which is the Northwest Educational Assessment. So these are tests that we do in addition to the state-required testing
Okay.
to track and monitor our student growth over time. This particular one, Brian, we do at all levels, and we've been doing this consistently for a long time. So we have, longitudinal data, we have it over time. Whereas like the state-required assessments have changed. The test itself changes every couple years.
Yeah.
This is one that we've consistently done for a long time.
Okay.
And this is another one where there was a budget transfer done on that particular one, to take it from another line to get to that from 18 to 22.
Okay.
Elizabeth?
As I remember too, with this, with the NEWA testing, that, I mean, there were, not only has the state assessment changed, there were some real concerns about the validity of the state assessment and how, whether it was an accurate depiction of the student. I also seem to remember the state assessment is more about gathering data for the school, the NEWA is more about the student. And it also helps you triangulate with grades, the state assessment, and then an individual student
All
assessment.
accurate. That's all accurate.
Because, I mean, I remember arguing about this line years ago, and it was because, I mean, a lot of us felt, especially for kids in the school, the NEWA testing is much more student-centered than the state testing.
Okay, I'm on page 7. Am I? Yeah.
That was 8.
Page 8, I'm on page 8.
Go ahead, Peter. 203, is that a contractual one as well, on page 8? Is that one of those things where it's locked in at
Think so.
50,000 per the contract?
I'm pretty sure, let me just check.
I believe so as well.
Yep.
And I meant to ask this earlier, but does that mean that, like, you are locked in at that 50,000 for the year, and so if you underuse that by 20,000 or so, is that money that has to wait until the end of the year?
You can't spend it.
So how
Just like
does-
the other one, you can't spend it. It just doesn't get spent. It goes into your fund balance.
Brian asked a great question.
Yeah.
Where does it go?
Fund
It goes
balance.
fund balance to reduce taxes the following year.
So this is in our teacher contract. The first amount that we talked about on a previous page, that was 60,000, was for course reimbursement for teachers.
Yeah.
This is for workshops for teachers, and this is part of our, so back to the Samantha question, this is part of our teacher contract.
But when, again, because you can't have, unlike other items, which are not like part of your teacher contract, when you are realizing, hey, we over budgeted for
Shortages,
this,
we can take from it.
We can take it, we can
Yes.
move it to the
Not
thing
here.
that actually need it. You cannot
Not
do
here.
that. This is going to the fund balance.
You got it.
Thank you.
All right, page 9. Israel.
Line 230, is that just the school board stipends?
That's probably school board.
Yes, it is.
And that would,
No,
is
it's-
moderator in there too? Clerk?
They have a different one, I believe. They have a different one.
Is it the line right after it?
No, the one after that, it should say, that's the meeting secretary, the person who takes the minutes. So in this case, there was a slight increase in the rate, so that's why there's a $500 of new spending, but that's the minute taker, not just for school board meetings, but we have
Subcommittees.
subcommittees that meet as well.
So yes, to Israel's question, 230 would just be school board.
Go ahead.
I would like to make a motion
Go ahead.
to reduce line 230 to 0.
Is there a second?
I'll second in case we did.
Second by Frank. Okay. Go ahead, Israel.
So when I look at this and I see it, and I know they have more meetings than me, and they have more meetings than most people. But when I ran for the budget committee, my goal was to do what I could do to help people in town that are hurting, because there's a lot of people hurting. And in my eyes, if I was taking a stipend, I'm taking money out of their pocket. They're paying taxes, which is giving me money. And I'm trying to help people, not take money from them. And that's how I look at it.
Anyone else?
Can you tell me a little bit more about how their stipends work right now, what they're set at, school board?
Trying to remember, I know the chair gets more than the regular members, but, so the school board just doesn't meet, for the meetings. They have subcommittee meetings, which generally, each school board member is on at least 2, if not 3, subcommittees. So the amount of hours, that they spend, it helps, as someone who did the job, I mean, you many times have to go from work, you're coming right to a meeting, maybe you're picking up something to eat. I mean, it's paying for the gas. It's not like, honestly, if you divided out the number of hours they spend in their stipend, if you hit $3, $4, $5 an hour, would be a lot. And it's really more of a way to, reimburse people for mileage and some of their expenses for doing. I don't think anybody is getting rich being a school board or a select board, member. And I know this tends to come up a lot at budget committee meetings. And I'm not in a position to dole out money to the budget committee, but you folks work hard too. And I know it probably wouldn't be so popular for the budget committee to give themselves a stipend, but you folks deserve a stipend. You deserve time, to be, for those type of expenses. But the school board members, as well as select board members, and you spend a lot of time. School board members do meet quite frequently. It's probably 150, 200-hour a year job, if not more.
And there are 9 of them.
And there are 9 of them, so.
Brian?
Well, I do like the motion. This was brought up last year. I think I'll be more inclined to strike the light item, but to transfer that amount to a teacher's line item, because we're always hurting for teachers. They're going to other districts, higher paid. I think it would be in good faith to dedicate it and earmark it just for teacher salaries. I know it's not a lot, but I think that will go a long way, because we want to retain teachers in our district.
Laura and then Israel.
And I think I said the same thing last year, and I don't want to speak for Izzy, but I don't think I don't think he suggested that cut because he thinks we deserve stipends as well. But I appreciate Brian's thought about perhaps moving that around somewhere where we know we could use just even a little more. I hadn't considered that, so.
Maybe like even like a performance, like a teacher merit pay for like high-performing teachers or something like that. Is there a line for that in the budget?
No,
Okay.
and that's something that would need to be
Contractual
negotiated with the teachers, but I appreciate the thoughts.
Okay. Israel and then Sam.
In my thinking of all this, I was gonna do a secondary motion, which was to, I didn't know if we could do it or not, which was to transfer this money to the school, or the lunch budget to help offset the unpaid lunch debts for next year.
Is that something we could do?
Yes?
Samantha?
I like that idea. I was also thinking in the lines that you stated that you've purposefully under budgeted for, like, that would make sense as well. I mean, like, on the track of like teacher salaries, like that line 30, that like we're 100,000, I mean, I know it's only 25,000-ish approximate dollars, but it's, I mean, that closes that $100,000 gap from line 30.
So to keep the committee on track, we're looking at two different motions. So we're looking at the motion to strike to zero, and then another motion to add 22,463 to something else. There's two separate motions here. So Israel's motion is to strike it to zero, but clarify if I'm wrong, Israel, is your next motion going to be to add that somewhere else in the budget?
Yes.
Okay. Allison and Peter.
I feel that, I mean, we originally talked about cutting it in order to lower the taxpayer, you know, the cost to the taxpayers, and now we've just moved it. And while I agree that the budget committee works really hard, I think the time that we have to invest in this does not even compare to, from what I've heard, to what the school board does. And I feel like there are a good group of people who are trying really hard for our kids too, and it's for such a small amount of money per person, we're kind of smacking them in the face and saying that you no longer even deserve a little bit of a helping you out, because these are people who take time away from jobs and families and miss things. And when something happens big, they're the ones who are in here making a decision for our schools, not us. The budget committee isn't called in on a whim because there's an emergency. So I personally just think that they deserve just a little bit of something. And it's, like you said, they're not retiring, they're not getting rich off being on the school board, but they are certainly making our town richer, theoretically, not financially. And I think it should be left as is.
All right, Peter?
But, go ahead, Brian, you let me go
Your
first
hand
last
was up
time. It's your
first.
turn to go first.
All right,
It's
go ahead,
fine.
Brian.
I'll go after you.
Thank you, Chair. I think as a follow-up to Allison's, I think for me, and I did talk to, I think it was Derek and you, Scott, about when were these stipends created? And it's my understanding they were never brought to the community as a warrant article. So they were unilaterally decided, based upon the governing bodies, to give themselves a stipend. So to me, I just because of that, I think it warrants striking to bring it to potentially the community if they want to give these governing body representatives a stipend.
It's not a bad idea. Peter?
Actually makes sense. All right, I feel like I want to go back to being a little bit more heartless than we've been in the last few moments. Only because, like, when I'm looking at this budget, what I'm thinking about is value that we're getting either money-wise or as a community, not really about, like, making someone feel good. That said, if the $20,000 that makes someone quote-unquote feel good or helps them pay, do we feel like it's getting us value as a community? Meaning, like, by them having this stipend, do we feel like they're potentially doing better work for us? And we're either getting a better school district, so a better product, or possibly saving money on our tax bill because they feel a little bit more motivated to do their job, right? That's kind of how all of this works, right? When it comes to salaries or compensation is like, do we feel like it's getting us more? So are we getting a better product, or are we saving money because Jack feels like he's gonna go over there and like for the fact that he feels appreciated, he's gonna work a little bit harder. So I have to ask you, Jack, do you feel like you're working harder for us based off of this, or do you feel like it's helping out?
I think the school board is probably more work than I expected it to be. I don't think anyone's getting rich off it. I'll have 3 meetings this week. I think I had 2 or 3 last week. I didn't know there was a stipend, personally.
I was gonna say that.
But I also think that the stipends were probably established long before SB2, so I don't know, it probably did go before the town in a town
It
meeting.
goes back 20 years, if not more. It's
And so,
a long time.
and I didn't get rich coaching soccer either, and I didn't coach for the money, but I coached for 19 years. I think I worked hard at the job. Does that mean the stipend, did I not cash the check that I got? Yeah, I put it in the bank, right? So does it make you motivated? Would if I was where I was at when I was sacrificing to coach? Yeah, it did. It put food on my table, even though it was only $1,200, but it was at least something when I was leaving work to make a minute percentage of the wage I would be making otherwise.
Scott, can you give us some history on this?
I don't have any. I honestly.
Oh, okay. I don't know if you knew like when it started.
I
or-
don't. I remember that Brian asked the question with Derek, and maybe Derek did that research, but I served on the board a long time ago, and I remember the school board, and I remember getting a stipend. So that was like 20 years ago. So it's at least 20 years old, and it wasn't something that started when it already existed, so I was getting one. That was in like 1999, so it's like 24 years ago.
Does anyone else have anything to add? Frank?
I kind of like what Peter said. I mean, when we're looking at the budget, we're looking at what are we getting for our money, and it's numbers, it's kind of cold, hard. You know, asking people, are they, you know, when they're running, are they running for a stipend? I would guess not. I would love to pay everybody who's in public service a nice stipend. I'd love, you know, that in, you know, the dream world, but I think it's important to set the standard. I don't understand why it's not across the board. Well, they do more work, they should get more stipend, we do less work. How do we quantify that? To me, that doesn't make any sense. The history of it, if at some point the boards decided to vote themselves a stipend, concerns me, especially when our townspeople are having trouble living. They're having trouble with taxes, inflation, food. There are many seniors that they have no mortgage, but they're having a hard time paying their taxes. It's public service, you know, and I agree with leading by example. I didn't run for budget committee because of a stipend or, you know, so I agree with Peter and Israel. Thanks.
Olivia?
I'd like to point out that the people on the school board are also town members that are also struggling and dealing with the increased cost of everything. Also, I think across every single department, we as a town have a history of undervaluing our staff and our departments. And I think we're really starting to see where that's having a negative impact, where we're having a hard time filling positions. And while that might not be the reason why people ran for school board, I think by completely striking their stipend line, we're really showing them that we do not value them in that way. So I don't think it should be cut, at least not in its entirety.
What would be a number that works for you?
I mean, I think it would be something we'd have to discuss further. I mean, I don't see how we as town members ourselves too can expect all of these people to keep showing up for us. When the whole Goffstown motto is do more with less, do more with less. Now we're just having less teachers, we're having less police, we're having less people that have qualifications to fill these roles, whether it's boards, whether it's in the actual departments. And it's the town people that are already suffering are going to suffer more. So I don't have an answer to what I would put, but I don't think striking it in its entirety is a good idea.
Okay. Kelly?
Well, I'll just add, because I'm sure the select boards will be on the chopping block at some point too, but Scott, historically, has the school stipend increased year over year?
No, I don't recall the last time it did increase.
It's been one time that I can remember in the last 12 years.
Yeah, but not during my, so
It's been a while.
6, 7 years of me being in the role, it hasn't increased.
And as I recall, Kelly, at that time, it hadn't been touched in like 15 years.
Okay. I just wanted to note
Yeah.
that they're not trying to give themselves increases.
No,
But
this,
just-
and in fact, the last increase, and it was probably 7 or 8 years ago, it was administration that was recommending it based on the fact that that number hadn't changed in 20 years.
Yeah. Well, okay, thank you. That helps bring up my point. So I know the select board voted as a board not to take stipend increases when we were in default. So it's been even prior to that, the past 2 years. But just for some context, so when I initially was elected, I tried to turn down my stipend. I was told I couldn't, that you had to take it. So I personally do some stuff where I try to give it back to employees through things that I do seasonally for all of our staff members throughout all of town. But I also keep track of my hours, and this just might be interesting to you from a select board perspective, that on average, per year, depending on what committees I'm on, like budget committee, for example, takes more hours than a once a month or bi-monthly meeting. And then how many elections we have is anywhere between 300 to 500 hours a year. So I will say it's not something that's personally important to me, but I know that it is personally important to some people. So I would say that it is an awful amount of work and a lot of nights being at meetings throughout the entire course of the year. So I would suggest that maybe if you're going to put it on a warrant article, that would be a fair way. But if you're not, I would just ask that you consider a reduction so that people can account for that, because there's a pretty significant amount of work. And just Frank, how you mentioned like the quantifiable way that we figure out who's doing more work and for what, that kind of goes the same way with just cutting it all together. So I don't know, I guess you guys just have to be into whatever you decide to move forward with, or maybe ask those boards what they think, because we've talked about it year over year on the select board, and I can say that for my board.
Samantha?
Thank you. So, I mean, just looking historically at the actuals that are on here. So in 2023 and 2024, it stays the exact same number. Or, I mean, I guess the 2023 actual to the 2024 actual. Is the stipend something that is paid, I mean, it's not like a weekly paycheck, right? It's like a one-time.
Twice a year.
Twice a year, okay. So this $9,000 difference, have they just not received their second?
Sometimes there are people who leave office and don't get a stipend, so
Okay.
that does happen.
I guess in like the idea of like, you know, I want us to kind of have like substantial unanimity, so I was thinking of a number, and it would be that $17,852, because that was the number that it was in 2023, if we were trying to pick a number. So I was just wondering if that was for a particular reason.
All right, Laura?
So I know every little bit counts, and I haven't done the math as to relieving the taxpayer of this 22K of how much point, what does that actually relieve a taxpayer of? And we're only on page 9. So just another, like to Frank's point, and everyone's point really, because I think everyone's brought up really good points all around, as to how much you're saving versus giving, how much the taxpayer would be saving when you may be risking some things. So just to, I don't have a conclusion to that yet, but just to throw that out there as a thought.
Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think for me, and even for my constituents, I think what Izzy mentioned, or Israel mentioned about the motion, I don't think we're dismissing the level of effort by the school board or select board. I know they work hard. I think it's the principle behind it, where it wasn't brought to the town, my understanding, so it wasn't voted on. So that's one thing. And I think also, in regards to what I like to see, take those monies and funnel it to the teacher line item so they could get more funds so we can retain them. Because again, that's what I keep on hearing is that we're losing qualified teachers to other school districts. So I know it's small money, but it's a step in the right direction. And I think that would help. And if we need to keep some money in here that it'll make everyone happy, then it should be commensurate with maybe what other officials get in the state, which is $100 a year, which is $200 in 2 years. To be, is again, some state reps work as hard, if not harder or less, and they get paid $100 a year. So again, I think it's not the level of effort, it's more the principle behind it. I think it's important to kind of focus on that, but also maybe help the teachers, which, desperately need help in regards to, the funding and retaining them. So that's all I want to say.
Peter?
Yeah, I'm so sorry that I'm doing the same thing. Laura, I apologize. We're getting kind of fixated on $20,000. But if I'm thinking about the value that I'm getting, I can't say that I can quantify it. I think I get a lot more value than $20,000 as a town from having a dedicated school board than, what we're actually paying for it. That said, what I'm trying to figure out is if we're, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
I'm all good.
I'm basically trying to figure out, will we get the same value as a community if we just send you guys a pizza party once a year that says, we love you, like, thank you. Seriously, and I actually, the jokes aside, what I would say is, like, that's part of what we're doing. It sounds like part of the idea is to kind of compensate for the fact for actual costs, right, that they incur just by having to serve this much, right? You can't you can't take opportunities to do overtime, right? All those types of things, like you have lost income that I'm not even accounting for yet. So it's really hard to quantify this. I have a feeling that you guys are really dedicated, and it's like, I'm almost like making a bet, like, if I didn't give you the 20,000, I'm sure you're still gonna show up. And that's a terrible bet to make. I do apologize for that. But I hear that bet, is what I'm saying.
Me, I'm out of here. No stipend, I'm gone. State reps get mileage on
do.
top of their thing?
He doesn't
They do.
get pizza.
Okay, so we don't get mileage, so that would be one difference, even if it worked the same amount. Mileage,
It's really apples and oranges.
it's
That's
not really the same, but, so that isn't their only stipend. I would call mileage a stipend. But do I think the school board's all gonna get up and walk away? No,
Remember, you're on camera.
I don't.
I think something.
I don't think they will.
That's
I've only
terrible.
dealt with them for a little while, but I think, I think on the other thing, like Olivia said, it is, it's making a statement one way or the other. So it's your choice which way you think you're gonna make the statement. Whether you think that there is absolutely no value in a stipend for the school board because they just are gonna do it out of the kindness of their heart. Or, and we're gonna take it totally out or change it to another line, percentages of a cent on the tax rate.
So
That also makes a statement.
Yeah, I'm thinking what you were thinking about the statement. I don't think it's necessarily the dollar amount. I think maybe it's like the voters and the taxpayers voted against a budget, and they're asking us to make decisions on a budget. And I'm thinking the easiest place to do it is to do it on elected official lines. I mean, if we look at the last, as long as I've been running in Goffstown, there's never a shortage of people wanting to serve in these positions. And I don't think the stipend is really like something that, oh, I'm gonna run so I can make the $3,000 a year. So I see it as like,
If it's bi-weekly, it's not 3,000, that math doesn't work out. Must be 1,600.
yeah, 16, yeah, whatever it is.
1,600 or less.
So I'm inclined to vote with Izzy. I think it's I think it's the message we're sending that we're serious about making these decisions. I don't even think the $20,000 in the grand scheme of things is so small, but it's the message we're sending to the town. Go ahead, Frank.
One of the things that keeps rattling around in my head is this has never been in front of the taxpayer. The taxpayers have never had a chance to really weigh in on it. So if this were to be striked, perhaps, somebody mentioned perhaps a warrant article. Put it in front of our neighbors, and they can decide, because that's who's really paying the bill. So.
Olivia.
I had a question.
Call Olivia, go
You
ahead.
can go first, Scott.
So, I don't know, we turned SB2 at a certain period of time where you had warrant articles, et cetera, but, and again, I'd have to like look back at my emails to see, what research, was done, but back before Senate Bill 2 and we had official elections, your budget, everything was discussed in a town meeting format, and it's probably counterproductive for someone like Derek to look in the annals of, history and read every single town meeting to see if that ever occurred. But please recognize that it might not have been a warrant article because it's only been in
Predated
place.
it. This goes back 25 years.
It may very well have
SB2 didn't exist.
It may have predated it, and it may have been brought up as a budgetary line in 1970s. I mean, you'd have to look, and it just might be.
Well, at that time,
counterproductive
maybe
to
the
this.
school board members were the only ones left in the room, and then they decided.
But back then, Joe, adequacy was about the same amount.
Yeah, back in the day. Anyways, Olivia, go ahead.
I think one of the things
Joe's gonna get that back
we're-
for us, don't you worry.
I think one of the things we're not talking about as well, we're talking about things like transportation, we're talking about time away from work. We're also not talking about the fact that multiple people that are serving, like on this board and on all the other boards and committees, have had to go through safety measures to keep their homes secure too. And those are very real costs that lots of people are facing. So while we're talking about that, maybe there was this nefarious thing where they snuck in their stipend, nobody did that. Like, let's be real, nobody tricked Goffstown into paying them a couple $100s. But they are still showing up, and they are still showing up while being threatened, and they're still showing up while being yelled at meetings regularly. So I think that goes for something as well.
Israel.
Jack, you said that when you ran for school board, you didn't know that there was a stipend. So you ran out of the kindness of your heart.
Yeah.
And all I'm saying, I don't think that the school board has no value. I think they're great people and they're doing a great service to the community. But we also had issues last year, and it turned into big issues where there was families that couldn't pay their lunch bill. And I'm trying to look at everything, and it's like, oh, do I want to cut a teacher's pay? Do I want to do this? And it's like, well, no. And the one that looked to me like the best one to cut, or not the best one to cut, none of them are good to cut. But the one in my eyes that would work best is cutting the stipend. And like I said, I was going to do another motion to transfer it to the lunch to pay off any outstanding debt. And in my eyes, that just shows that we're trying to work.
Go ahead, Jack, and then Olivia.
You're asking me? I don't want to just pay off back lunch debts. Me as a person, not as the school, speaking as a school board, but me personally. And my not need for a stipend doesn't mean there isn't someone else. I don't wanna just pay off school lunch debt. I would've wanted us to put it in the budget that we feed all the kids. Right? And so we're splitting hairs over $22,000. We're on page 9. So it's a vote that you guys are gonna make. Do I think everyone will walk away? Do I think it's nitpicky and grandstanding? A little bit, personally? Yes, I do. We wanna talk about serious budget numbers and about things that get spoke on social media and the way people react to that. I'm more than willing to have that. We can have it all night. I'll lay it bare on the table. I'm gonna abstain from this vote, I'll tell you right now, but
Thank you. Olivia?
I just had a question for Brian and Scott regarding the school lunch debt. That's not something the school does, correct? As far as me, it's expected that the families reach out and work with the
Correct.
the parameters
But some
that are
school
set.
districts do. So
Right.
there are
But at
enough.
this time, there's not.
Yes, in Goffstown, we're not currently subsidizing, we're not covering any outstanding debt. And this is a big topic, by the way. There are some communities that have $100,000 of school lunch debt that the communities are paying for. We are not doing that in Goffstown.
Okay, so a follow-up with that, since it's
Point of order,
being-
the lunch debt is not the motion
Well,
on the
that's what
floor.
I mean, is that.
And those really need to be uncoupled,
Right.
because that's not the motion on the floor.
Do you have a question about the motion?
At this point, I'm not entirely sure what this motion is, because we're
The
talking
motion is
about
to strike the
things that
school board
district
stipend to
is-
zero.
Right, and everybody's already talked about that, but then there was a second motion.
The second motion is
The
not
second
been
motion
made.
is not in order, it's
Okay.
not on the table.
Then
They're
no,
mainly
I
just
don't have any more
proposals.
questions.
Okay. Is there anything new to add to this specific conversation? Okay. So the way we do the voting is I call the ayes and the nays, and then I'm supposed to say the members that vote against the motion. I have to say aloud, as well as the people that abstain. So basically, people can put it together and figure out who voted what. Okay? So if you are in favor of Israel's motion to strike reference line 230 from 22,463 to zero, please raise your hand now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If you're opposed, please raise your.
Can you please keep your hands up? I want to make sure this is accurate.
No, I'm going to do this after.
Okay.
If you are opposed to Israel's motion, please raise your hand. Laura Stevens, Allison DeCesare, Olivia Welch-Erdahl, Elizabeth DeBrule, Peter Gregorakakis, Jack Carbonneau, vote no. Are there any abstentions? Selectwoman Boyer votes no, or abstains. So it's 7 to 6 to 1 is the vote, so motion passes. Okay, Laura.
I know. I didn't form my thought yet.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. We're gonna keep moving on, unless, Israel, go ahead.
I wanted to put in a second motion to transfer those funds to the Goffstown the food service.
Scott, can you give us a reference line or a?
There is none, and
Yeah.
I believe it's out of order, because as the Budget Committee, you do not have that authority to do that. There is no line to make a transfer to food service.
We have the authority to increase a line in the food service
Yes.
budget.
Not in
Can
the
you-
food service budget, in this general fund budget.
In the food service budget, we do. Then why don't we look at the food service budget?
You do, but you wouldn't.
jump funds.
It's an interfund transfer,
Right.
it's kind of complicated, but, hold on a second.
We're not trying to transfer the funds.
I know that, but you're putting
So-
money in that line if you wanted to.
We're
No?
increasing a fund.
That, yeah, one's a general fund and one's a food service fund. You can't. it's
Okay. We don't
two-
want
there's-
Special
that's-
revenue
there's
fund.
There's two different funds. So you couldn't.
Couldn't they potentially,
There's a transfer line in here that you can do 52, hold on.
I just wanna try
Can
and
you
make
bear
this
with me
work
a
for Israel
second?
if possible.
It's It's in one of those 50, hold on a second. Interfund, like it's an interfund transfer, right?
I think there's usually a food service transfer too.
Right. But that would be, it would be in one of those lines. It would be 5221, 931. It's on reference line.
Be like 76-ish,
Because I don't know
but
if you got the-
that's just for Bartlett.
We've really not had to use it
Yeah,
before,
so
so,
I'm not-
'cause we've not done it.
Four separate ones. There's
Right, but so like, I mean, you just.
5251 is transferred capital.
Yeah, but that-
So it must be like a 52.
Well, I guess there's, no, because yeah.
And again, you just have to keep a dollar in that, so
76, and then
it
whatever.
would be,
lines are like it, divided by 4 to make it easy.
line 386.
Do you need me to recess for a minute? Let's take a 5-minute break and let them figure out what line this goes on. People can use the
It would be
bathroom.
line 386 to 386.
We're gonna recess till 7:56. 7:56. Scott, what was the line item? Can you say for the public?
Reference line 386.
Okay.
10-000, 5221-00-931, interfund transfer, food service fund transfers.
Okay, so Israel, do you want me to help you with this motion, or do you know what you're doing?
Help me with it if you want.
Motion to
I just
add.
want to transfer it.
Okay, so the motion is to increase reference line 386 from $1 to $22,464.
Correct.
Would you like to say that, or do you want me?
I will second that. Whoever
Okay,
wants to
Israel
say
moves
it.
that? Okay, Samantha seconds.
Whoever wants to say it, I'll second.
Any discussion on this?
I have a question.
Laura?
So how, if it's put there for a specific purpose, is that the line that can only serve that purpose / what else would be done with it?
It's not the school board's purview how they spend that money, but the budget committee, by voting, makes it known that that is what the will of the committee is, but it's ultimately their choice how they spend that money. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I do not support this motion. I think this is a highly political, controversial matter with the school lunch, which everything that's been going on. I do support the idea of moving that money to another line where the need is more critical, as I think Brian pointed out earlier. Also, by the way, the message to the community is that out of a $54 million budget, you've only got $300,000 of new spending. That's the message to the community that we have heard them by them voting for a default budget. So I think putting this money into the school lunch fund is not a smart decision. There are multiple areas of more critical need in the general fund budget that we should be looking at, and I think we should table it and wait till we get to the end and see where we think, as we go through and ask our questions and look at all these lines, where we think the need is greatest.
Okay, so is that a motion to table it?
No,
You're my
I didn't mean table the
parliamentarian.
motion. I didn't mean table the motion, I meant,
You could,
That's
though.
in order. You can table the motion if you want, but.
well, I don't want to
or-
table the motion.
Okay. Kelly?
Well, I just want to say from like a, not on the school board obviously, but having to think about managing that money, I also worry, does it put the, like, the school board doesn't currently have mechanisms in place to choose which students they forgive debt to, so I like question if that's gonna put them in a really tough position and/or the like legality of choosing. I don't know, that just makes me a little bit nervous.
Okay.
I don't know if that's valid or not.
Yeah,
Maybe they
it's
do
not.
have a mechanism and I'm not aware, but.
Samantha?
Thanks. I know I seconded the motion so that we could talk about it, but I have to agree with Elizabeth. Like, I think there are lines that we knowingly underfunded, and to put it there, and if you're looking for a motion to table this, I would I would be in favor of tabling it so that we can all think about it and maybe come back with some ideas.
Israel, are you willing to withdraw your motion until we're further in the budget process?
Yes.
Okay, great. So motion withdrawn. We're going to continue as we're going. So we're on page 9. Page 10. Page 11. Elizabeth.
So line 286, that legal professional services, I know that's going to fluctuate. It's actually been pretty stable, to be honest, but it does fluctuate based on what you guys have to deal with at any given time, right? Somebody challenges
Is
what
that
you're
91A?
providing.
And also, well, this could
This
be a
one-
number of
this one
things. This would be
was.
general counsel,
Yeah.
but another factor in this would be if we had contract negotiations, the years that we have contract negotiations, our legal fees are typically higher as well.
Okay. Do right-to-know requests contribute to this
Yes.
line?
Yes.
Is
Because
the
a lot of
district spending a
times-
lot of time on right-to-know requests?
Last year, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And those would have been dealt with at this district level? They're not going to be dealt with at the individual schools?
Correct.
They're going to be dealt with at the district level?
And Elizabeth, just for some clarification, there's a new state law that allows districts and towns to recoup some of the cost if there's overly burdensome right-to-know requests. So that was a
I thought
law.
that got defeated. I thought that got voted down.
Oh, no, it's law now. So
Oh.
it was HB 1002, I think, just got signed into law. So it's kind of something where like they can start trying to recoup some of this cost as well if there's an overly burdensome request. Yeah.
Okay, and then the request, they're personal requests, are there corporate requests, are there data mining requests as well?
Yes.
All of the
Yes.
above,
All
yeah.
of the above.
Yeah.
Okay, and is there anything being done at the state level about that?
Where,
Because I'm
um,
not sure why taxpayers are paying for companies to provide information to companies.
No, I completely understand. This is like my wheelhouse there. The right to know, there's discussion around clarifying what constitutes a citizen under the right to know law. There's a couple pieces of legislation in there. I don't know where it's going to go. I haven't read the bill being proposed, but there is some discussion about that on the state level because we do want to prevent the sort of data mining or large businesses just filing like onerous requests on, Brian, how much of the time do you spend on right to know?
It can be quite a bit.
Yeah.
Can be quite a bit.
So that's something that we're looking at.
Okay.
Olivia and Allison?
I just had a quick question as far as the HB 1002.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there like a specific threshold for where the state steps in? What's that amount, do you know? What's the burdensome?
I forget what it got to. I'll get that sent to the
Yeah, I'd
committee.
just be interested in knowing what
Yeah,
that is.
I'll have Danielle send that information to the
Okay,
committee.
thank you.
So is it the state reimbursing us for those costs?
No, it allows the district to charge, I think it's
charge.
$15 an hour after 10 hours worth of work or something like that.
Okay.
But I don't want to quote anything for the public
No,
right now.
I
I'm
just
not.
was generally wondering where, like, you were saying recoup some of the costs, and I was wondering from where.
Yes.
Okay.
Peter and Sam?
I was just going to ask, have you guys discussed, like, using that tool as a district and whether it's actually worthwhile in the
Not
terms
yet,
of?
no.
like-
Not yet.
Okay, just wondering, because I assume anything in which you're trying to recoup also means you have to administrate that. You have to do the work in order to recoup it. So that's a cost benefit that you guys have to go through of like.
Right, I mean,
how much
so
is this gonna
you were
cost us
referencing
for
a
the
data
hour?
mine, right? So I had one where I had it was like, I want to see every check or something like that, like issued in a particular year. I got to make sure that, like, there's nothing student-specific, like, so you got to through the.
And it's
like,
redacted, like, the
Thousands of
names.
stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it takes a long time.
I remember distinctly Kelly Boyer, the select board sent a letter to the state reps asking us to vote for that because I think that is on a town level,
It's a massive problem for
a
us.
problem.
Yeah,
Yep.
a massive problem.
Right. Anything else, page 11? Samantha?
The very last line, 287, I know, can you just explain a little bit more about like what the management services are? Is there any part of that number that can be decreased?
It cannot. That is the SAU, the cost of running the SAU, and New Boston and Goffstown each pay a share of that.
Okay.
Brian?
Thank you, Chair. Can you further elaborate on that same 287, the difference between the budget of 2025 to FY26 default? Where the increase is coming in?
Yeah, so the increase this year for the SAU service has to do with some personnel lines. We just did the first budget presentation, and the SAU will have a budget public hearing in December. But primarily, it's some staffing increases.
It's
Health
insurance, IT security, IT equipment. We're looking, I don't know if you want the contracted services for.
Some of those other
Okay.
purposes as well.
You know, the other thing that we have to deal with at the SAU level is we deal with all of the federal grants, IDEA. Before that, we had ESSER grants, and the amount of oversight that's required, of that is considerable. So we manage like $1.3 million of grants on a normal year. We managed almost $3 million during ESSER, and you're allowed to get a 3% administrative allowance off that. And I can tell you that
Indirect costs.
indirect cost is called, and I myself have spent hundreds upon hundreds of hours dealing with grant compliance. And that's just me. Wendy Kohler, our assistant superintendent, deals with that as well. And it's, the federal compliance is crazy. Not making any political statements, but it's a huge chunk of what we have to do. And then we get audited on those, almost, seems like the what do they call it? Not the selected, or, we seem to always get audited, even though it's supposedly random, right? So it seems like every year we're going through another federal audit. And that takes, like I said, tons and tons of time and prep work.
As a
Brian.
follow-up, I might have heard you incorrectly. Is there a working definition for that title, that line item? Because I heard like additional personnel, healthcare. I thought there was all line items that would fall into that from the district side. So I'm a little confused on why that's there in those, like a working definition for that line item.
For what line item?
The 287.
287.
So the working definition would be Goffstown's percentage
Percentage.
of the entire cost of the SAU.
Okay.
So Goffstown pays 80%,
It's, yes, it's a 78 point something
and
percent.
New Boston pays 20.
Yeah, 22-ish.
Yeah.
You all set, Brian?
Yes, thank you.
All right, we're going to page show off. Kelly?
Line 291. What's the salary pool?
So the salary pool is for contracted increases for non-union administrators. So because they're not part of a collective bargaining agreement, the voters don't vote on their collective bargaining agreement, and we have to budget for salary increases for all of our administrators. That's what that number is.
Does every administrator get the same rate increase every year?
No,
Okay.
no.
Who decides?
School board?
Laura?
So there were no increases, 22, 23, 24?
So this
We've
was
seen
another
that, right?
one that, being on default, that we level funded that.
Well, level funded the increase, right?
Right,
So you're
you
getting
got
the
it.
same, they're getting the same increase, not
The
more.
dollar amount is the same, although the percentages or how it's distributed might be different, but the dollar is still the same.
Okay. Anything else, page 12? Or page 13? Peter?
Is 330 based on specifically who we have hired and what we have in those roles?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Page 14? Peter?
Same, actually, well, yeah, facilities maintenance. Is that through, is that wages or is that something else?
What line, please?
Sorry, 342.
So those are not wages.
I can explain that one.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so this one is why I'm so glad that I pointed this out during the presentation, so I'm actually glad that you.
Is that our,
What?
no, go on.
Yeah, so, many years ago, the district entered an agreement with Honeywell, where there were upgrades to different systems, and with that, it was called a lease, it was a performance-type contract, and you'll see that every year, we had to pay $168,000 as part of that performance project. Added to that, next year, in July of 2025, we did another project. It was not a performance contract, but it was this, EMC was the company where they redid all of the lighting, we replaced the boilers in many buildings. That payment is going to be approximately $250,000. So that number, a year from now, when Doug does the budget, will be $168,303 plus approximately $250,000. We believe that we're going to have less cost for that first year's payment, and that's why I did not budget the additional $250. I only budgeted like another like $40-something thousand. But next
Okay.
year,
You're
you're
gonna
going to
see a
see
big bump.
$168,303 plus around $250 will be in that line. The $168,303 only has, I think, 2 to 3 more years left on it, on that Honeywell. I think it's 2 to 3 more years, then that goes away.
Don't get mad at me if next year I ask you about it, because I'll probably forget by then.
I won't get mad.
Okay.
He never gets mad, so.
I feel like I ask about the same lines every year.
Yeah.
Okay.
What is that? Oh, yeah, you told me.
Page 13. Let's move on to 14.
We were on 14.
You want-
Okay, we're on 14. I lose count. Israel.
I just want to know for line 345, what the rental land and buildings are.
345 is we rent space on Depot Street. It's New England sheet metal. There's a dance studio on the bottom, and we rent space there, and our IT staff is predominantly housed there. Again, we don't have adequate space in all of our buildings, and as you know, we got portables everywhere. So that price includes heat and electricity for, I think we got, what, like 6 or 7 people in there?
Elizabeth?
So this is a bit of a more general question, but you kind of touched on it. There's not very much facilities in this part of the budget.
It's
a new
coming.
part of the
It's
budget.
coming.
It's coming,
It's
I'm sure
coming.
it is.
Yep.
But do you have any sense, I guess I'm trying to get a sense of how much, there's always going to be maintenance costs, always.
Right.
But how much of the facilities expenses are going to the fact that we're trying to fix things because they're, well, that doesn't make sense. I'm trying to like get at, if we had newer buildings, how much of that facilities budget would go down? And how much of that facilities budget is just kind of, it's all, you're always going to have to pay it.
That's a
'cause
really
it's just-
tough question. You know, the general, yes, you can say a newer building typically has less, maintenance to it. But a well-maintained building will also have less maintenance. So I give a lot of kudos to our facilities department because when you look around, our buildings are older, but hopefully some of you who took the tours, they're in damn good shape considering the age of these facilities. So the $3 million that we spent on upgrading the lighting will hopefully give us some savings on our electrical costs. Upgrading a lot of our boilers will hopefully, there'll be less repairs on the boilers. You still have to do annual maintenance on them, but hopefully the cost of running, heating the buildings will also see a decrease. So I think we're trying to stay ahead of, the maintenance as best we can, knowing that we do not have new buildings, knowing that with state building aid the way it is, we might not have that in the near future either. So, but making sure that we do annual roof inspections and that we're doing all of those things helps us in the long run.
But what we're seeing is for all of our facilities, every trade is costing us more. So if we have an electrician come, it costs more than it used to. If we have a plumber come, anything that we touch, every trade has gone up in costs. So we're looking for, hopefully, over the course of this budget and the next budget, is some stabilization of these costs. So when we continue to see, year after year, a vendor that comes and the vendor is charging us 7% more than they did last year. So we continue to be challenged by all things facilities, and we're looking for some stabilization and the cost of materials. So if you need to put in a new hot water heater, the electrician costs more, the plumber costs more, but the unit itself costs a lot more. So what you're gonna see throughout, so Elizabeth, when we get into the schools, you'll see all the facilities lines, for the most part, are up, but we tried to keep them as reasonable as we could, recognizing that we're on default, and recognizing that we might need to do some of these things over multiple fiscal years.
And you're using your CRF fund
Oh, yeah.
to chip away at these bigger projects.
And in fact, the CRF fund, the school board hasn't officially kind of decided, but we're looking primarily at one project, which is the second phase of our water suppression, fire suppression system at Mountain View, which is original, circa 1989. And we did the first phase of it last year or the year
2 years
before,
ago.
and we've got one more coming, and that is what we are targeting for the CRF.
Jared spoke about it very forcefully at our last meeting.
Forcefully?
This-
Jared?
Yes.
He's usually
The
soft
Cistern project, yes.
He's
the
timid.
Cistern
Jared's very timid.
Okay, and I do want to say, I went on the tours, I think a lot of us did. I was blown away by how great the buildings looked and how much, I agree with you, Scott. I've been in and out of these buildings for 20 years and they looked beautiful, really, really top quality. They were cleaner and nicer than I've ever seen them before.
I know, please thank our custodial staff every time you see them, because they're the Lord, Randy and Dawn do a great job, but it's the folks day in and day out who take pride in the building.
Yeah.
Frank. Quick question on line 345. So this is the rental to house 6 to 7 IT people. And you said something, New England Sheet Metal, is that the building?
We rent from them, so
Okay.
we've been doing this for, oh my God, a long, long time.
Okay.
We've been renting from them, and again, that includes all of the utilities, et cetera. And we have, the other nice thing about it is that if there are issues in a particular building, other people can work there while we're renovating something else. So it's been pretty helpful. We have meetings there as well, because it has conference room space. So when all of our administrative assistants, our secretaries get together, a lot of times we'll have the meeting there. So it's been a pretty good bang for the buck, I think, because it gives us also an insurance policy in case we have to temporarily relocate people for building-related issues where we got to, displace somebody for a month or two.
Right. So it sounds like kind of a Swiss Army knife.
Much so, yeah.
Okay,
I
thanks.
mean, it's decent for what they give us.
Right.
Allison?
Hey, Scott, so if you've been renting for many years, why were there no actuals in '23 and '24,
I
and
don't-
'22 was
I-
huge?
I don't know. I mean, maybe it's because that's where it was accounted for. It used to be at the high school. That's why. It used to be part of our alt ed program,
It-
and that was attached
historically,
to
yes,
the high school.
that's it.
Yeah.
And then it pivoted
We moved
to
it to
a
district.
district line because now we put IT and other folks in there.
Okay, that makes sense.
Laura?
Thank you. Line 364 at the bottom. So I imagine the homeless student transportation is something that does jump around year to year. And of course, I'm not upset to see a lower number. But I'm wondering if that number's realistic, because the 2024 actual was like crazy
It's,
more.
So let,
crapshoot.
yeah, let me start by saying, I usually complain about unfunded mandates at the state level. This is a federal. This is a
Okay.
federal unfunded mandate. So the law is called the McKinney-Vento Act, and essentially, it provides important, necessary supports to families experiencing homelessness, but transportation is extremely volatile. So if we have families that are experiencing homelessness, we might be reimbursing mileage, we might be paying for mileage for them to transport kids. That's what that line is. And it is very hard to predict.
Right.
So sometimes we kind of use, here are the known students or families that might be impacted, so we try to give our best estimate of what those costs will be. But much like special ed, this one can kind of go up and down based on need.
And we're trying to manage this through sharing resources with our neighboring districts who also have to pay for this. But if we can utilize one or two buses where other districts chip in on that, that's what we've been doing.
But if you look at the 2024 actuals, 111,000, so that's a perfect example of how volatile this line can be. That if we have needs that are unanticipated, and they can sometimes, so one year, you'll spend 27,000, and the next you spend 111. I mean, that's volatility.
And sorry, can I do it? And we're seeing the 2020, the 37-ish K, is that default? Is that, we took that way down? Or was that an anticipated
It was anticipated.
number? Okay.
It was anticipated.
So the jump was that big?
Right.
Okay.
So just to clarify how this works exactly, I kind of remember. So you've got a family, maybe they're living in a car, or maybe they're living with grandparents. And so this is basically, the price on this is so high, not because we're giving them transportation in the district, but because we're going out of district
It could
to
be
pick
either
them
way.
up
Either way.
and bring them in.
Both
Either way.
directions. Both directions. So
Okay.
under the McKinney-Vento Act, families have the ability, if they wanted to remain in the school district where they were while they're experiencing
So
homelessness.
they're not uprooting their kids and
Right.
putting them in new school.
That's it. And all of that's really good for kids, right? So particularly if a family intends to move back to a community, but it can be both directions. It could be a family that left here and is now somewhere else. It could be a family that was somewhere else and wants to be here, any combination therein.
Okay,
But again, volatility.
okay.
And this is another one where the price tag is not on the administration of this, but this is a very, very challenging job to deal with these families and the struggles that they're going through and making sure that you get the transportation. This takes a lot of time, that particular line.
Allison, do you have something? Do you have your hand up?
No,
You're
I'm all set.
Okay. All right. Anything else on page 14 and page 15? That's closing out the SAU budget.
So, sorry, I
Go
know
ahead.
you're going to kill me,
Yes,
but a
yeah.
couple of just global things that hopefully then we can move past this in the individual school budgets. Can we talk about health insurance for a couple of minutes?
Yeah.
So every year, for as long as I can remember, it's gone up 10,
I know.
14%.
Not this year.
Not this year.
Not this year, right?
Right.
This year.
Not here.
Not here. In other districts, yes, and the
Yep.
town's gonna tell you about, I talked to Danielle and Derek, the town not so promising with their increases. So it's based upon a rating pool. So our particular SAU 19 rating group fared well. But other rating groups in other districts or the town, there were different pools, they did see double-digit increases in some cases. So we got lucky.
What was the percentage increase for us?
It
on
ranges based upon the plan. So it was less than 1% for one plan, and it was as high as 4.9% on another plan. But overall, it might have been a 2% bump, overall. So we got really, really lucky.
school? So that's based in part on whether people are getting really sick, right?
It's based on claims.
Yeah, on claims.
It's
So
based on
if
claims.
people are getting really sick, then your claims are going to go up and your premiums are going to go up and.
Right, so we saw,
Yes.
everybody saw this, so during the COVID years, people did not seek treatment, and then you did see people get it, and then all of a sudden you saw that spike. And depending upon the rating group, like, we saw a more normalization of it, but others didn't. So this is another volatile one, where, like, one year you see 10%, the next year you see 2%, the next year it's 11%, like, it's all over the board.
We've seen a bunch of school districts that are in the 12%
Yeah.
range.
Okay, so.
And it's big
I realize
numbers.
this is going to be a controversial idea, but for a long time, right, the benefits plan was just amazing for teachers. And I think we started to kind of move to, bigger co-pays, more contributions to the health care system. And I don't know, have we looked at models where we shift to a more mainstream healthcare program that maybe pay teachers more?
So these are based upon the collective bargaining, like, so we already are in a contract. So in any future contract negotiations, which I think is in 2 years for one group and then 3 years for the other, those types of things come up because there's a cost of a contract, and that cost of the contract is based upon the salary increases and is based upon the benefits that you give, and there's those trade-offs in between. But that's something that is collectively bargained between the teachers' union and the school board, or the support staff union and the school board. And historically, this is something that a lot of bargaining units negotiate, and sometimes they don't want to negotiate. So it goes both ways.
Okay, and so I get all that you can't just arbitrarily
Right.
change it. We're not going to go in and change any
Right.
of these numbers. But as you're doing these negotiations, I'm just
Everything's
wondering
on,
if there's a way.
everything's on the
Everything
table.
is.
Right, I
yeah.
mean, if there's a way to bring these costs, make these costs a little more predictable and manageable. I'm not trying to,
Yeah,
like stiff anybody. I'm saying if we pay them more out of pocket, maybe we could get a healthcare plan that isn't quite as generous? I mean, are there still like $5 copays?
No.
Those
We-
days are gone?
We
Those are
made,
20, I think.
we made changes in the teacher contract 2 negotiations ago. That was pretty
There's
significant.
none of that anymore.
Okay,
Yep.
okay. All right, so that was one of my big questions. The other one is just about general administration. I mean, this seems to come up more and more that I think we should talk about it. Are we over-administered?
You're asking administrators this.
I know I'm asking administrators.
Well, but we can
what
talk
is the-
about numbers,
Is the
right?
balance, has the
So one of-
balance changed?
One of the things that we can talk about is we can objectively look at numbers. So where's your sheet, Scott?
It's the Department of Ed has it's called iExplore, and you can go into that and you can see, like, what percentage of a budget is based upon administration. So
So the state average is 11.84%. Goffstown's at 10.4%.
Okay.
Bedford's at
Bedford's
10.5, just to give you a little context. So in terms of general comments about administration, and I'll let Doug and Scott weigh in. So if you don't know, Doug was a assistant principal for a long time before he became a business administrator in another community. So Doug's also he's got the teacher hat and the administrator hat. But some of the things that we're dealing with from an administrative perspective is the number of student issues that we are challenged with continues to increase. The significance of the behavior that we're dealing with children, the mental health needs, the safety needs of a school, and being able to respond to potentially active shooter situations. All of our emergency operations planning is very significant. Another big one that we've seen is we've continued to have challenges with hiring certified trained staff. So 10 years ago, I had 6 teachers that were on an alternative pathway for certification. It's something called like statement of eligibility. So 10 years ago, I had 6. Today, I have 18. So it's gone up threefold in 10 years. That's because we can't hire staff, and when we can't hire certified staff, we have to put them on an alternative pathway to certification, and then we have to basically help them learn how to be a teacher.
And that's
So,
time-consuming.
so the amount of administrative and coaching support that teachers requires just continues to go up. So I will say we are not over budgeted for administration. The challenges have never been greater. And in this school district, we are anticipating some fairly significant retirements from senior level administration. So we're trying to make sure that we have people who are sufficiently trained to replace some of those folks. So I don't think, the data tells us we're not overstaffed in this area. And again, this is one thing, in New Hampshire, you can compare every single cost for every school district. Every single school district. You can't do that on the town side. So there's no, what does DPW cost in one town versus another? What does a police department cost? What does the town hall cost? You can't compare that on the town side of things, but you can compare it for us. So the data is, we're at 10.4, the state average is at 11.84. So we're a little under that, but I've been an administrator for a long time, and it's never been more challenging than it is right now. And on top of that, we also want to make sure that we have the ability to give people good customer service, that we can return calls to people, we can focus on issues that families might have, and that takes time. So the administrative challenges, I think, have never been as great. In just one incident, so let's go to Mountain View for recent examples. If I have someone write a threat on a wall of a bathroom, that might take 2 or 3 people a week to try to investigate and figure out. And by the way, the whole time you're doing that, you need to make sure that you're covering lunch duties. You need to make sure that you're covering arrival and dismissal, that you have all of the general administration functions continue. So the safety needs, the security needs just continue to increase exponentially. We continue to ask our administrators to do more and more. So I don't think we're overstaffed, Elizabeth. I think we've made some increases over the last couple years because we've really identified that we were short. And I think it's really important to make sure we always have an administrator in a building.
That's a key one, because at Bartlett and at Glen Lake, we shared. And when one of those administrators, was out, it was like a mad dash scramble, like how are we gonna cover? You can't have a teacher pull them out of a classroom and then same thing, if you have a student that is having a very emotionally challenging day, somebody has to deal with that. And more often than that, that's the principal or the vice principal. So where we are right now, it helps, deal with some of that. The other thing too that I can say, so I've been here 6.5 years, and Brian, like, spot on. Like, I cannot believe like how much more my job has, what's involved in it, and the compliance piece is, it's craziness. Like, the federal and the state compliance is, it's mind-boggling. And if you're getting federal dollars, you're paying the piper, because you have to do so much reporting day in and day out. So it's great that we get these safety grants, but if you knew how much work that myself and Randy and others had to deal with it, it's a ton. And that's not going away. The other thing I will share is that our building, what administrators do now, what people do now is so much different. And just little things like, we have to worry about access controls, doors open, doors not working, and then whose key fob is not, and who's gonna deactivate somebody, activate somebody. Before, it was just a key. Open the building. Not anymore. Everything's locked down. Security cameras. It's a different world. And with that, there's people who have to do the work. And unfortunately, the teachers need to teach, and everybody else has to deal with all of the other aspects. And the safety one, man, we meet all the time on safety stuff, all the time. And again, I don't know if those certainly when I was a kid, this was not the case.
It's a different job than it used to be. It really is.
The good thing is that the parents are a lot easier to deal with now. So, okay.
All right. But I don't understand, why is everyone laughing?
Especially you, Peter, is great.
I don't call you, so
yeah. It's different, and I think the expectations are also different. And then obviously administrators have to deal with things that are going on with kids, social media, you name it, and it's not easy, to say the least.
Okay, so I want to gauge the committee. Do we want to keep carrying through for a little bit longer? Maybe try to get through Bartlett, see how things go? I know my goal was Maple Ave as well, but.
Yeah, I don't think that's happening. We can try Bartlett.
Yeah, no, and there's no rush. We have extra meetings budgeted. I want to make sure we're going the pace of the committee, so. All right, so we're going to move on. We're going to try to knock out Bartlett. So, page 16.
This is what Suzanne, I know what.
Peter?
438, was that, remind me, was that like a shift in what we were trying to accomplish from like ones?
Well, we're.
Sorry.
That's okay. You can jump ahead. Go ahead.
Reference, oh my goodness, how did I go so far ahead?
You're an overachiever.
No,
You're zealous.
you guys were talking about like the same thing for like 30 minutes.
I know.
I figured I'd get some work done.
Peter's on page
Administrators were talking.
47.
Ah, he wasn't listening.
Touche.
All
That's a
right.
mic drop.
Go ahead, Peter, on page 17.
I'll go back. I accidentally skipped some pages. I apologize. 16. Could I ask about 404 though?
404.
Yeah. Was that a shift when I'm seeing those increases? Remind me.
So there's a
Teacher
few
salaries.
shifts, but that would also include moving some teachers around, different positions.
We moved some teachers from Maple Avenue to Bartlett, and that could account for that too.
Yeah, we did some
Yeah.
transfers. We were seeking to increase some of the experience level in some of our grade level teams.
Gotcha.
So we had a couple of more senior staff that we transferred from Maple Ave to Bartlett.
Thank you.
All right, page 17. Peter?
Sorry, 438. Special education Bartlett paraprofessional salaries. Is that the same situation?
Yeah, we moved resources from one school to another due to need.
And that's very common for all the special ed lines. We move staff around, paraprofessionals, behavioral support, teachers.
Frank?
How many teachers does the 370,154 entail?
That's paras.
I mean, paras.
So if you go to this presentation for the buildings, it lists all the staffing.
For each building.
Yeah, so let me find them. Bartlett starts on page 29.
Just 12, and then 12 special ed, .6 regular ed.
There you go. So page 30, Frank, on the bottom.
Yep, got it. So we're looking at line,
112. Six, I'm sorry. For you, that was
438.
438, yeah.
right, no, I mean on the staffing.
12.6 people, paraprofessionals.
Okay.
So to kind of piggyback off of what Elizabeth was talking with administrators, we went from 12 classroom teachers to 11 and used part of that salary to fund an extra administrator position.
Correct.
I have a problem with that.
So the administrator, it was already in the budget, it was half-time, and we were seeking to make it full-time.
And that's in this budget?
Yes.
Okay.
And the teacher is the one, and the teacher was promoted to be that assistant principal.
Okay.
How did that impact class sizes?
It increased them.
Not much.
Yeah, the class sizes are still considerably smaller than Maple
Yeah.
Ave.
Okay.
So the
Yes.
class sizes are appropriate.
I mean, I think we already discussed this at the last, when we had this presentation, we didn't have an issue with the class sizes though, right? We're still saying, okay, we're still low.
Yeah.
Relative.
Right.
Okay.
And noting that Bartlett's classrooms are smaller than
Yeah.
Maple's classrooms. but it's
Physical
still-
space.
Yeah, physical spaces.
Yep. So if you were to build a new elementary school, you're probably looking at 900, 1,000, or 1,100 square foot classrooms. And we have a lot of classrooms that are in the 600 square foot range. They're a lot smaller.
Anything else? All right, 17 all set here. Go to 18. Laura.
Thank you. This is kind of a general thing, and I don't want to oversimplify because I don't feel like this is simple, the process or any of it. But there's like no new spending. And
$295
Yeah.
on that page.
And the default, I mean, the increase there, that must, so are we really only increasing the default what we have to for contracted services and everything else we're just really
Yeah,
not funding
Yes.
more?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I laugh, but I say that in all
Well,
seriousness.
I mean, you
have a
don't
default
have.
budget, I mean.
Yeah, and we're on a default budget, and
Right.
when you look at the per pupil cost in Goffstown, it is the lowest in the state for a reason.
Yeah.
And increasingly, I've shared with the school board, and I will continue to say this, we shouldn't be really proud of that.
Right.
We could do better. We could do better for our kids. And the fact that we take the lowest per pupil cost in the state and have achievement metrics that are at or above the state averages in basically every area is pretty darn good.
Allison.
How long can that last?
great question.
I think it's starting to run out now. I
not
feel like,
sustainable.
I feel like I'm starting to see
Yeah.
that start to fray right before my eyes.
And I'm seeing it, I mean, we're trying to deal with it on the, as I mentioned, the IT and the facilities part, but that's where I'm more nervous, is on the IT and facilities part. Obviously, teachers and wage, we always have to worry about those, but I am very concerned about being able to replace our existing IT equipment. I can tell you flat out that when we talked about what was not included in this budget, Mountain View Middle School and other schools wanted more devices, et cetera. They need more devices, but we're trying to deal with the realities that we're in. So, and then on the same thing on the facilities side, again, keeping ahead of things and making sure that we're proactively maintaining them, replacing them when we should. There's a cost to that, and I do too worry that that might be running out soon.
Laura, and then Jack, you have something.
Thank you. So just looking forward, and I know we're only not even all the way through Bartlett, but I mean, we've looked at the numbers and we've been to the schools and seen the presentations. And I live here and I don't want to pay more taxes, higher taxes, anything. I just feel like for the future of the kids, the families, we're really doing a disservice if with this less for more. I know that's not popular. And I know that's not something that people vote for, or it is something people vote for. I just think something to think about, again, I don't have a conclusion to this either, that the only cut anyone suggested were the stipends. And to Elizabeth's point, even to Israel's point, it's because everything is already, I imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, so low. There's nothing new. And even the default with the contractual stuff, I'll say it again, is so low. No, the number overall when we get our tax bill is high, but I don't want to do a disservice to the future of the people of Goffstown. That's why people come here. It's where they want to set up their families and grow their families. And then people that have been here for a long time and they don't want to see things, go in a certain direction. I just, if anyone else is not at a loss, like, please speak up, because I just don't see a lot of things to get rid of. So please, like, speak now, if you do and you want to, because I don't want to see this come to an unthoughtful And when it gets to town meeting and stuff, I'd rather it have thoughtful discussion now. And I know we've been having it, clearly, it's 8:45. But I just want to encourage people to keep doing that while we're here.
Well, I know myself, I have something to make before the end of the meeting anyway.
Okay, and
So
like I
we're
said,
gonna
we're only
continue on and
part of the way through.
go from
Yeah.
there, yes. All right, so we're on page 18. Go ahead. Oh, sorry,
I would
Jack.
like to speak.
Yep, go ahead.
I echoed that sentiment at the school board last meeting, that by doing less with more, we're setting ourselves up into a trap when we don't ask to fund the things and make them get shot down. When you sit in the tech committee meeting and you listen to the wish list that the IT guy has to just bring your stuff up to date, you know that those are real struggles, and we're not sufficiently funding that. When we go meeting after meeting and Mr. Bulkey speaks about our inability to fill positions or hire teachers, and my daughter is a teacher and I speak to her and she talks to me about her people that she works with leaving to go to districts where they're making considerably higher money, that those challenges are definitely put against us here in Goffstown at the school board. So that doing less with more does hurt you. And it's a credit to the system that we have achievements as high as we do for the money that we're putting out, as high as it seems. And I'll go back to beat the band on 2003, the state funded 40% of the average of education in the state. And in 2023, they funded 20% of the average tuition in the state. You can split that hairs any way you want. But if the state was doubling up what they're paying, our property taxes would be less. And a lot less than by eliminating the school board stipends.
Okay, is there anything on page 18? We're gonna move on to page 19. Page 20. Peter.
Sorry, just really
Go
quickly,
ahead.
519 on page 20. Remind me what's the big shift?
So speech and language is an example of something that we struggle with hiring, Peter. So very often for our speech needs, we oscillate between being able to hire employees and having to buy contracted service. So that fluctuates because there might be a year that we weren't able to hire speech and had to buy it out of that contracted service line that you saw on the 000, 1200, 339 line. That's where we would look to purchase.
Impressive.
Yeah.
No, that you knew that.
Yeah.
Go on. Okay, so what's the preference on that?
Oh, always employees, always.
It's a lot. The stability, obviously, is one, knowing the students, but the cost of a contracted service is way higher.
And this particular line that you pointed out is for speech assistant. It's like
Yeah.
it's not a speech pathologist, it's a speech assistant position.
So the biggest issue is hiring.
Yes.
I usually think hiring is, I mean, I know it's not always this, because great jobs are finding a hard time to hire, but I usually think that's a compensation issue, but
So-
is it, how much of this is a compensation issue? Like, if you had the right budget, quote unquote?
So
For that.
speech would be an example that you would almost have a separate cost for some of these really hard-to-find positions.
Yeah.
But they're all in the same contract. So let's say, for example, and by the way, years ago, we used to have, if we had an opening at an elementary position, for an elementary teacher position, Pre-pandemic, I would get between 100 and 200 applications for one job. So now, same opening, I'm lucky if I get a dozen people. And of them, they may or may not be qualified. So there's a lot of challenges associated with hiring and paying appropriate wages. And having an appropriate workforce will continue to be our biggest challenge. Biggest challenge moving forward, hiring and retaining teachers.
What do you think, sorry, just to kind of go on, you have discussed this with us before, but when you're saying, you're talking about a very large difference. Again, I mean, I don't know if you're talking to other districts, you're talking to people nationwide, where are you losing those inquiries to potentially? Do you have any idea where those inquiries are being lost to? Like, where are those people that used to be of the, you're right, saying 200 was what we had before, now we have 80, something like that. See, I don't remember numbers.
Yeah,
But-
I think and years ago, I used to teach in teacher prep programs, and the number of people going into public education continues to go down. So this is something that, from a sustainability perspective, is very troubling and very concerning. So you have to have a workforce. You have to have a workforce. We continue to see less young people who want to go into public education, and the demands have never been as much and as challenging as they are right now. So it's kind of a perfect storm of not finding as many staff as we need to. And in those particular areas that it's challenging to hire. And speech is as challenging as any position we have. And they're licensed, it's a national license by ASHA, which is the Association of Speech and Hearing. And so it's a very hard certification to get. So if you have that certification, you have a lot of options. You can work
And
for.
what is it again?
You gonna take classes? We could-
It's harder than you might think, Peter.
Trying to say I can't do hard things.
I'm telling you, it will
I
take
tell my
you years
kids they
to
can
do
do
it.
hard things.
Years to do hard things.
Okay. Moving on, are you all set, Peter?
I'm going to pause for right now because I think the question can be asked later.
Okay. We're on page 21. Page 22. All right, so I have a line 568, the assistant principal salary. I'd like to make a motion to reduce that back to 34,700 from 90,000.
Which number?
Reference line
568.
568. I don't think we need 2 full-time administrators in Bartlett.
I'll second it.
Second that, okay. This just goes to the discussion on the tour. I think it really does a disservice to our students to reduce the amount of teachers and increase the amount of administrators. I understand we had a long conversation about what administrators do, but I'm concerned about the trajectory happening nationally, but also in the state about the increase in administrators and decrease in teachers. I think quality students and student performance happens at the foundation is the teachers. And I think if we're going to be supporting our students the best, we should refrain from increasing administrator role and increasing teacher salary instead. So that's my position. I want to go back to the 34,700. If the school board decides to increase the teacher line again to get back up to 12 teachers, I'm okay with that. But I think we're on the wrong path. So I'll just let everybody else go now. Laura?
Thank you. When we were on the tour, we learned a lot about what that administrator does, and all the IEP paperwork and other paperwork that goes along with special ed and different needs for students that has to be done. I was under the impression that this is a huge part of that administrator's job and something that took the burden off of individual teachers and the principal, so they can focus more on getting that learning done. They only have the kids half day there, and I think half day is like 2.5 hours. It's not even a half day.
Bartlett's a full day.
Oh, it's Bartlett, sorry.
Yeah.
So regardless, it gives the teachers can focus more on the teaching and not having to do all the paperwork. So that makes the time in the classroom just more efficient, I think.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, and Bartlett, remember, has the highest number of students with IEPs, except for possibly Glen Lake. Is that true?
And the highest
that's what I
percentage
was
of free and
thinking.
reduced.
The highest percentage of free and reduced lunch. It's in a very urban area, so it's going to have more security concerns than some of our other schools. And it is paperwork, but it isn't just paperwork. It's the fact, as they pointed out, if you have a student with an issue, you need someone else to deal with it, because the teacher cannot leave the classroom to take one student somewhere else to a room where they can get themselves under control. To have a principal and an assistant, two administrators in a building of 175 kids, that does not seem excessive to me. If we were talking about 3, 4, 5 administrators, yeah, that'd be too much. But 2 administrators in a building, it just doesn't seem that much with 175 kids, which is also, by the way, it is low enrollment for Bartlett. Normally it's up around 200. It might be up around 200 again if you get kids from Bog Road.
It could be 200 in a month.
Right, and you're also building on Danis Park and that one too.
Jack?
And I also know that when we talk about it at school board, it also has to do with when one of the principals is sick, someone's got to cover for that. So instead of taking someone from the SAU to go over there and cover, like Miss Kohler or something like that. And then, again, the deregulated children, it's usually the administration that has the training to act when it's severe.
Olivia?
People keep bringing up wanting to retain teachers, and I don't think we're going to be able to retain teachers if we don't support them with qualified administrators.
Peter?
I just think we asked really tough questions when they were doing their presentation when it came to this, and I guess I just have to ask, like, I understand the national idea or the bigger picture, but we can look at big picture trends, but then we also have to answer what is the specific need here so we can do the best job. And I think what I specifically asked of Ms. Pishka was, do you think this is going to make for a better educational experience for your children, right? You're losing it, you potentially could spend this money elsewhere. And I felt like she was able to answer that question in a sufficient way. So I'm not sure why you still are thinking that about this specific situation. Again, I can see why you think that nationally, but why are you questioning their judgment? Like, sounded like they gave us a really good presentation.
Okay, well, I mean, as a member of this committee, I have the ability to question anybody's judgment. I guess what I'm saying is enrollment's going down at Bartlett. It's been happening over a significant amount of years, and they've had 1.5 administrator in that school for years. How long have you had 1.5 administrators?
5, 6 years at least.
No, longer.
Gotta be
That's
more
right,
than
because
that.
it was Bousquet and, right.
They split the administrator half with Glen Lake and half with Bartlett. I'm concerned about the increase
So
of
for
that half
years,
position.
the principals asked to make those assistant principals full-time, and for years, I did not agree with that. And for the reasons that you've already stated. But as we've gone through the last several years, the complexities of administration have just continued to increase. The high stakes needs for school safety continues to increase. I'm not comfortable going back to 1.5 for these schools. Both Bartlett, which has our highest needs arguably, and Glen Lake, which has our youngest children, you're talking about children who start at age 3. The needs are very significant. So I hear where you're coming from, Joe, and for many years, I was in your camp. But over the years, I've kind of come around. I thought that they were short-staffed administratively, and I think that being at 2 administrators is the right amount. I
Okay.
really do.
Anybody else? All right, well, I have no, like I'm probably not going to win this vote, but I do want to vote because I think it's important.
You could withdraw. You don't have to.
No,
You've got a
no, I
motion
want to
on the
vote.
table.
No, I
You
want to
should
vote.
vote.
Because I think this is a great situation where another member of this committee just brought up that there's no other motions being made. This is a decision, this is a motion that I think that the public needs to know that, we're trying to make changes to the budget. So with that, all those in favor of my motion to reduce the line from reference line 568 from 90,000 to 34,700, reduce the administrator by 0.5, please raise your hand now. Anyone opposed? Laura Stevens, Jack Carbonneau, Peter Grubelkakis, Elizabeth DeBrule, Olivia Welch-Erdahl, Allison DeCesare, Richard Manzo, Samantha Kearns. Abstentions? Kelly Boyer. So that was 5 to 8 to 1. I'm gonna let Frank do it real quick.
That's what we paid them.
Yeah,
Take it
it's
out
hard
of
to
my-
count
take it out
and
of
talk
my-
at the same
Too soon,
time.
Peter.
Take it out of my stipend.
And Laura, you voted against, correct?
Mhm. Can we say it all out loud again when he's done?
Say what out loud?
The votes?
Yeah, I think the vote, I'm waiting for him to,
5 to 8, 5 for the motion, 8 against,
1 abstain.
1 abstention.
1 abstention.
Okay, so motion fails. So we'll continue on. We only have a little bit left of Bartlett. So after 22, we have 23 and 24 and 25. So page 23.
It's only 6,700 of new spending, it's not a lot.
I know.
There's not a lot of wiggle room.
24. And finish up Bartlett halfway through page 25. Kelly.
Line 631, the equipment, what's in that line? Is that a rental or something?
$631 for equipment, main.
It was reduced.
This is, so while we have not spent money in those lines, having $500 in the line for when equipment needs repair or servicing just simply makes sense, so.
Oh, no, I assumed it was something you already rented. That's okay.
Oh, I'm sorry?
No, you're good.
Okay.
All right, anything else for Bartlett? Okay. It's 9 o'clock. Do we want to?
Sleep.
Huh?
Go to sleep.
Do you want to go to sleep?
No, let's keep going.
Allison.
Picking up
Can I ask a general
speed.
question? And actually, I think it's for you, Scott. So you gave us the, excuse me, the year-to-date expenditure report in our packets this year, right? Yes? No?
I think Catherine did.
Okay.
I think Catherine
Somebody did.
added it, or
It
Danielle
was
did.
it's, generally, I'm wondering, can you condense the proposed budgets, but the years.
Doug can, next year.
To make it look like this. Where you can see more
Unfortunately-
concise, it's not possible.
Everything is possible, but for a price. So what I learned from other school districts is that they bought a custom, which would allow you to kind of merge the two, but it was like I think it was like a $4,000 to $5,000 a year cost in order to do it for this purpose,
Yep.
and I just didn't
Okay.
think
We
that it
have
was
the,
worthwhile.
we do have the ability to request it in that format. We'd have to make a formal motion.
No, I don't,
Of
I
Scott.
want to make a lot more
Maybe
work,
of next
like-
year, but we'd have to spend the money on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was just a general.
Yeah. Kelly?
Can I ask a question on the revenue sheet? One thing I didn't see, are you guys charging for use of the field at all?
Yes, and I'm trying to, I don't think we have rented it out yet, but there is, if we updated our facility use policy to allow for it.
Frank?
What does it cost to rent a field? Just curiosity.
You guys shut my computer down. I think it was like $200 an hour with lights.
It's identified in our
It's in
policy,
the policy,
KF.
KFR. It's in there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
And so, to Kelly's point, if we had unexpected revenue that came in for turf rental fees, we would take that in as incremental revenue, and that would go into fund balance. That's how we would treat that.
So we're gonna break here. I think it's a good time. We have extra meetings if needed, but I just want to do a quick school and town update, if there is one, since last Thursday. Kelly? Nothing?
We haven't met.
Okay. Chad?
We haven't met.
All right, great. Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Olivia, second by Brian. Any discussion? All those in favor? Raise your hand. Opposed? Abstentions? We're adjourned at 9:06.